example, right? We tend to default to language that assumes that the player is a man. I think there are things that we can do as a community to be more inclusive, down to the bare bones kind of naming, like architecture of characters and levels. Like there are ways that we can depict gamers more equally, I think, a lot of times. And I think a lot of brands are doing this better than they have historically, but it's always like some guy or a bunch of guys playing games together. And, you know, certainly there are a lot of badass women playing games, and we can articulate that that character, you know, that badass woman, like put her in commercials, put her in our ads. I think we just can't assume, right? Because it's like any kind of gender equalization effort. We just need to make sure that we're thinking about what our assumptions are when we're portraying any situation, or even as we're developing and crafting games, like how we're expressing who those characters are, what they are called, how the communities interact. Are there enough female player options for women gamers to select? I mean, there's like some really basic things that I don't know if we're always thinking about that at the most basic level. So those are all opportunities. But one thing that is certain is that girl gamers as a force are growing, and that brands have been really, really supportive, and we're on the right path.
Well, great.
Dina,
you've got. Oh,
do we have? I don't know how tight we are on time, but to the extent we have a minute, I would just say our company mission is to build the world's most inclusive and diverse community of gamers. So we spend a ton of time thinking about and investing in this issue. So I just offer a couple of comments. Number one, a positive sign, something that I think portends a movement in the right direction, is that the split male-female is much tighter in mobile games than it is in PC or console games. And so as more gaming migrates to mobile, and as mobile continues to be more fully distributed globally, and as 5G becomes distributed, I think some of the numbers are going to start to even out just because of the platform side. Number two, a lot of the problem today is, Grace was making that kind of an iconography argument, like who are the characters, what do they look like, do I see myself in this character, and the lack of seeing someone that looks or acts or represents myself can be a deterrent. But another piece of deterrent has been just the incumbency of the way the industry has evolved. And so most businesses, most teams in esports, most orgs in esports, most partners that are investing in esports are looking for reach. And if you're trying to tailor a message in a reach-based strategy, and 60 or 70 or 80% of the audience is going to be a thing, you're going to tailor that message towards the majority at the expense of the minority, and that just exacerbates the problem.
And that, Ari, we're going to have to wrap it up there.
So anyway, what you need to do is focus on minority groups intentionally and make sure that they feel included and spoken to directly, not as a nice to have, but as a need to have constituency that deserves its own content, messaging, iconography, et cetera.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody.
Certainly a fascinating conversation, but glad to hear that lots of big brands are taking note of esports. Dean Takahashi has made note that there are members of the esports panel are available in the Hero Stage Q&A Zoom room at this time. So if you have questions for them, please join them in the breakout room now. And continuing on, we do have a couple of polls that we have not really gotten a chance to get to, but we do have one on esports here. So maybe we'll do a quick poll. Will esports be hurt or helped with no in-person events? So we did this poll yesterday and got some interesting answers, but I wonder if it's changed today, depending on who is watching the stage with us. I'll give you guys a second there. If you're on your Zoom screen, you can see that poll pop up. You can go ahead and vote just right on screen. All right. And it's even more overwhelmingly in support of help, which is good to see that more people are taking note of esports in the time of self-isolation and quarantine, more video games. I mean, I don't need to tell you guys that video games are hot, as Mari Takahashi said on our panel this morning. So we're going to go ahead and continue on with our next speaker. Please welcome John Smedley of Amazon Game Studios, Eve Crevachet of Take This, and Mark Chandler of TIGS, who will be moderating a talk on strategies for mental wellness in gaming. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Mark Chandler, founder of the International Game Summit on Mental Health, and this is a chat about strategies for mental health wellness in the gaming industry. I'm joined by John Spedley, head of Amazon Game Studios in San Diego, and Yves Crevichet, executive director of Take This. Mental health is a challenge to address in the workplace, and this chat is going to be about how do we create a more supportive and welcoming environment for people experiencing mental illness or mental distress in the workplace. And how do we even get this talk going also? You know, for example, just from my own experience, I've actually had 3 senior executive friends from the industry unfriend me on Facebook when I've tried to have conversations with them about the mental health policies at their companies, actually. So this is a really big problem. So, that's what we're going to be talking about right now. Yves, I'd like you to kind of start off with some of the stats about what we're dealing with in the workplace, and then we can just go on from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Take This, we are concerned with mental health as it concerns the folks who work in the game industry and the experience they have. And so overall, in the general population, 50% of people will experience some sort of mental health challenge in their lifetime. And that includes anything from a one-time diagnosis related to a stressful incident, say, for example, quarantine, or a long-term mental health diagnosis that requires ongoing support and treatment and sometimes medication and hospitalization. But this all to say that across the board, mental illness and mental health challenges are really very common, and they're pretty normal. And there are certain work environments and work situations that create greater levels of potential challenge. And those are the areas of concern that we talk about at Take This in regards to the game industry itself. And those include uncertainty, job stress, burnout, crunch, and other factors related to diversity, online harassment, et cetera. And so we think about both the general population and the general challenges and the specific situation inside the game industry because we are a mental health organization that speaks game.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you. Is there anything different that you've noticed about the games industry compared to other industries in regards to mental health, illness, and awareness?
So when I think about differences, I think primarily about the conditions inside the industry. It's a hit-driven cyclical business with lots of ups and downs. And so you experience very often amazing highs and amazing lows, and a lot of churn and change across the industry. And so lots of people go through lots of different jobs, lots of different games, and lots of different development cycles. And sometimes those are canceled, sometimes those are delayed. And so that level of uncertainty can be particularly challenging. And we also see an industry that plays out online. And so the experience of making games and having them subject to online criticism and often online harassment is another really particularly unique challenge for the game industry.
Awesome. John, I'd like to go to you next. Yves brought up some really compelling points there. The cyclical nature of the industry, it's something that is just there. It's probably something we can't ever get rid of. You know, I'm sure it's no different than the movie industry or the music industry. But is there any way that you can see something like that does, cause people with some sort of mental health illness or issue, that cyclical nature can be, very tough for people to handle. Have you, in your many travels for all these companies you've led over the past 25 years or so, have you kind of figured out some sort of way to smooth that curve out, those ups and downs?
The gaming industry is like just about any other kind of creative industry in that when we are making things that are very, very creative, it requires a lot of focus, a lot of energy. And, just like any other creative industry, there are people in it with depression. And I myself have depression. And when you're when you're dealing with the issue of, depression or mental illness in general in a creative industry like ours, you have to look at things like crunch. You have to look at things like schedule. You have to look at things like, when you talk about the cyclical nature, this is an industry, that has a lot of churn in it, and it can be a very stressful industry. The flip side of that is you can make things that touch a lot of people's lives, and that in a lot of cases actually give meaning to other people's day-to-day life. We saw that when we made EverQuest. We saw, couples spending time online together. We saw families playing online together. This is an industry that really kind of sees both ends of the spectrum, from creating things where it can be stressful, but it's also a lot of fun, all the way to the consumer where, they give us feedback in real time. And sometimes that feedback can be a little tough to handle, but it kind of comes with the nature of the job.
It was different back then. The culture wasn't nearly as toxic as it is nowadays. And back then, people were willing to help each other. You'd always get these, people would do, I forget what it was, a yell/Y or something like that, looking for help to, help go drag their corpse, /corpse dragging. But
Mark, you know what? I'm not sure it's that it's changed. I think it's just gotten bigger. I think games still offer an amazingly supportive environment and community, and we're actually seeing that right now during this pandemic, is that people are going online because they have to, and they are discovering they're discovering what a lot of gamers have always known, which is that there's really meaningful relationships to be had online, and there's really meaningful relationships to be had through play and through the engagement in these beautiful games. It's just that the internet overall has gotten has matured in a way that can be very, very challenging and unfortunate.
Well, it's matured, but it's got worse. We have the, it's way more toxic, way more horrible on the internet now than it was back in, the 1999, 2000 days. What do you think about that, John?
It's interesting. I would say it's changed, but we saw toxicity early on. But, as it relates to mental health, though, I don't think the things that have gotten worse are there's just a lot more people out there, which means you get a lot more of a big mix of personalities. And what can be challenging for people making these games is not to internalize the criticism that you see every single day online. You see people just saying the worst possible things, and you have to sort of develop kind of a zen about not responding too quickly to that. And you just have to realize that these are just passionate people playing games that you love. How many times have you sat in a movie and just yelled at the movie screen because the character did something so stupid, or playing somebody else's game and you're frustrated with something? The culture that's developed over time, I think, is one where just people feel like they can say anything that they want to. And that can be challenging, especially for people that are going into it. Maybe they're depressed and they read and they look for criticism. You're reading 20 good things and you look for the one bad thing and you just focus on that. And I see a lot of that. And it is something that you have to spend time talking to your teams about, coaching people not to, internalize too much of it. And meanwhile, I'm trying to follow my own advice, at this time. It can be challenging.
John, just to piggyback on that, one of the things that I say in terms of maintaining good mental health and good mental health practices really it's all about good boundaries, right? That boundaries are hard to maintain. I talk a lot about my own challenge with boundaries as a parent, right? My daughters are behind me, that beautiful picture. And being a parent involves being really clear about your boundaries, and working in an industry that plays out online means being really clear about your own boundaries and understanding what's relevant and what's not to you, and what to internalize and what not to internalize, And I think you really hit the nail on the head. You have to, that in terms of supporting mental health in a workplace, you need a lot of guidance and a lot of support from your colleagues and your supervisors. Leadership really matters here to identify what is worth paying attention to and what's really not, right?
How do we move that forward? How do we set something up, some sort of plan, blueprint for companies to use to start making those steps to help remove the stigma at work, because it is absolutely there. We all know this. I know it because of my own illness, John, I'm sure you know it also because of your illness. I know you're better now because you've, I forgot the name of what you do.
I've the thing that I advocate for this is very simple. It's like just about anything else. You have to manage it and you have to take it seriously. So I'm very open about the fact that I have depression with my teams. I always have been. I encourage people, if they want to and if they're comfortable with it and they just want somebody to talk to about it, I encourage them to do that. I'm super open about it online. And I find that an amazing number of people, because the statistics are very real here, 1 in 6 people in the United States is on an antidepressant. That's a very, very large number of people. And when you look at something like that and you realize that if you're talking to, a team of 60 people, 10 of those people are gonna be on antidepressants. So I'm just open about it. And I find that when I'm open about it, people just chill on the teams about it. They'll talk to me about it. They'll come up, they'll ask me questions. Even if I'm having a bad day, I'll be open about it. I'll even be open about why. And the only thing that I can do is share my own experience and try to help, kind of the people on the teams that are in the same boat and just have somebody to talk to. Really, that's 90% of the battle. Yeah,
it is. And John, it's wonderful that you have been open about it and that you continue to be. I think that part of the challenge is that not everyone's like you, and that there is a lot of stigma and a lot of fear around coming out and saying the thing and just being really clear about how you're feeling. And there's also a lot of people who don't know what's going on, who, because of stigma, don't even have the opportunity to understand that they're maybe having anxiety or depression or experiencing some sort of mental distress. And so when I talk about how, when I think about how do you reduce the stigma, it's one, people like you being really open about, at a leadership at a high visibility level, being open about their own experience and being willing to share that and talk about it and use it as a way to facilitate other people's conversations. But it's also about increasing the literacy, the mental health literacy of people, so that they understand and have language with which to talk about their own experience and the people around them. And that's not something that everybody has. And those of us who've been down a journey of going to therapy and seeking support and sometimes taking medication, is that we take for granted that level of literacy and awareness. But talking about it, and the other thing that I think about is, if we have good representation of mental illness in games, then the very things we make help us to understand and describe our own experience, the things that we play and we make. And so I think that that's actually a really important piece too, is good representation in the very games we make and play.
So with what's going on with COVID-19 in the workplace right now, everybody's working from home, and companies are having to learn how to adapt to what's going on. This brings up something really interesting, because I myself, as somebody with a mental illness, having a 9-to-5 job is impossible. But I can do great, outstanding work. I just can't do it within the confines of something like 9 to 5. Now, we're seeing the world, having to hunker down and having to adapt. And for some companies, it's easier to be able to do that. Other companies, it's really hard. John, how is this working out for you guys? For people being at home, and is this something that if people are, if you're learning from this and seeing a different way you can now go forward with, is this something that you might consider for people that do have some sort of illness at your company, that giving them more flex hours, things like that?
Sure. So I'm fortunate because I work for Amazon Game Studios, and Amazon has one of the most liberal work from home policies I've ever seen. And I will say, this situation, although not ideal, is kind of forcing sort of the workflows to get better, but and sort of the day-to-day management to get better. In terms of, kind of what you have to watch out for this work from home thing, what I've seen is, and I can speak personally about this, I can also speak to, some of the, some other good friends I have in the industry that share depression. It's it's very important to have a lot of touch points throughout the day. So for example, my team has a 10:30 stand-up meeting where everybody every day. And then we have a 4:30 happy hour, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's just, you want to talk, about anything. We just sit there, drink beer, and talk together, and don't talk about work as much as just other stuff. We're finding that people need to talk a lot more when they're working from home. And it's a thing that they actually need. They need that interaction. A lot of people are stressing because their kids are home with them. And that's kind of thrown a monkey wrench into it. So in terms of flexible time, that's what's great about working from home, is it lets people do that. And from my perspective, as long as they show up for the 10:30, I'm totally okay with any hours they want to work, as long as they're getting their work done. So I'm lucky enough to work for a company that really supports this. And I think what we're seeing in the industry from friends that I'm talking to at other companies that are going through this is everybody's learning the same thing, and the same things like make sure to talk to your people every day, make sure to have frequent one-on-one conversations, just sort of the obvious stuff becomes mandatory when you're trying to run a team from home. So far, it's working out pretty well, I have to say, but I have noticed a change from the first few days when it was kind of neat. Oh, cool. We're all working home. Great. That's awesome. To now it's like, all right, I'm prisoner 24601. I am, people feel like they're just stuck at their houses, and that's a frequent topic of discussion. So what I would encourage is that happy hour, that opportunity for people to just blow off steam and talk crap. If they want to talk about, how much they hate having to be their kid's teacher, great. Let them talk about that. Just listen. So a lot of listening is, I think, what's in order of the day now. And it seems to be working out so far. So far, so good.
Yeah. John, what you're talking about, I echo as a manager, as a leader, is there's a lot of emotional labor that managers are putting in right now to support their teams. And I'm finding that to be pretty intense emotionally myself. And so the other thing is that I've had to really take kind of another step in terms of the seriousness of my own self-care and how much energy I put into maintaining my own mental health, and then also being really explicit and clear about that with everyone else, so that I show that as a model. So not only is my own self-care really important, but my demonstrating and being clear about that self-care is important. Which leads to another part of this, which is that we are suddenly in a much more personal, blurred boundaries kind of situation, right? All that talking, we're talking about our lives in much more open ways often with our colleagues and with the people who work for us than we would have otherwise, because we have no other choice. Because our work environment is also the environment in which we're living in all the time, and everybody knows about what my daughter needs because she just pops in the middle of some, video conference, at least once or twice a day. And so I think it's both people need a lot more talk and support and one-on-one and just chances to kind of vent. And also people need a lot more modeling of good self-care. And I have a question for you, John, which is, how much are you seeing productivity drop, especially as this goes on longer? Because I think that's going to be a long-term challenge is, wow, people, especially as a parent, I just don't have as many hours in the day. What are you seeing and how is that playing out? So
far, knock on wood, we have not actually seen any slowdown in the project itself. What I will say is iteration has slowed down. So the simple stuff, the things where you're like looking over an artist's shoulder and they're trying to show you something and get your take on it. These things take longer now. There's longer back and forth. And I also find that the in-person body language, smiling, that kind of stuff, you have to be a lot more explicit. You have to be a lot more thoughtful about, hey, I really like that. Like you can't just smile at something. It has to actually, the words need to be said. And people need to feel like, hey, I just tried this thing. What do you think? You got to be able to give them quick feedback. So that's what we're doing a lot of is we're playing our game every day and we're making sure that we, with each other, and we're trying to keep that constructive feedback loop going. So far, I haven't seen productivity slow down. What I will say is I have seen the number of cycles we iterate go down just naturally because of what I just described. You can't just stare over somebody's shoulder as easily. So, but not as bad as I thought it would. And also with regard to kind of learning about people's personal lives, yeah, we're all learning a lot more about each other's personal lives than we actually probably intend. And that actually has some really good unintended consequences. And, I know it's gotten me a little bit closer to some of the members of my team who I don't know their wife and kids just because they haven't come into the office. Now we're starting to get to meet them. And it bothers zero people when somebody's kid comes into the room and wants to talk to mom or dad. No big deal. In fact, quite the opposite. When it happens to somebody else, it makes you feel good when it happens to you. So, in a weird way, I think this is going to bring us closer. Certainly, I know as somebody with depression, there's something that I'm very much a stickler about, which is working hours versus non-working hours. Mm-hmm. And I'm in the same room I game in. That bugs the crap out of me. I don't like that. I do not like working at the same place I come home to play games. So like personally, I get up, I have dinner with my family, and then I come back in, and then it's a different room. And a lot of the people on my team are doing something like that, where they're trying to keep it this careful balance. And I encourage that, not just physically, but mentally. I think it's good for people to feel like, okay, I'm not at work anymore. And so we all sign in and we all sign out for the night. That way we let people know these are our boundaries, and it works great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I have a little ceremony where I actually turn my computer off, and I turn even if I'm going to use my laptop, which is hooked up to multiple monitors and stuff, later for personal use, I turn my desk off. And I turn the circuit breaker off, and I walk away from my desk as the space where I am. So I'll use my laptop in the living room or at the dining room table, but not here after work hours. And that, those signals are really important to people. And those signals, it would be great if those kinds of things persist in really clear ways into post-quarantine life, right? Because those boundaries are good all the time. They help prevent burnout. They help prevent, cultural crunch. They keep kind of a lid on that work hours thing. And they're good signals.
Yeah, we're lucky because Amazon is not a particularly crunch heavy company. It's just never been that way. People understand that when you work at Amazon, you got in here because, you're good at what you do. So we do our level best to make sure that we're working a very full productive day. And that hasn't changed at all with the coronavirus and working from home. What has changed is just now we just need to be a lot more explicit with each other about, work boundaries, personal boundaries, and everybody's being pretty good about it so far. We've had zero issues so far.
I mean, I think the other thing we really wanted to talk about a little bit was other more general accommodations around, how do we set up studio culture? How do we identify positive studio culture for good mental health, right? In kind of a more general way. And what are the tools that developers and studios have at their disposal for doing that? John.
Yeah, well, traditionally most gaming studios have, EAP programs. That's sort of the go-to for HR, right? But to me, that's a fallback thing. And the most important things when you're trying to set up people for success with mental health is, first of all, making sure that they understand this is a job. This is not your life commitment. We're not expecting, 100 hours a week out of you. Say those words. Make sure that they understand that, we want you to have a home life. We want you to have a work life, and we want those to be in balance. And make it clear from the first day they get there that's important to you as a manager, and that's important to you as a representative of the company. Amazon is really reinforcing about things like that. And sure, they give us the resources like EAP, but what they really do is they give us the tools and the resources and the time we need to do our jobs right. So talking to people and actually letting them know those things officially is a very important part of a new hire coming on board. Also, I talk pretty regularly about this subject with my team, and I'm open about my own struggles with depression, but I talk in a more general sense than that. Just like, hey, if any of you guys are having any issues, I want you to know that either you can come to me, you can go to the company's resources, or if you just need some extra time and you're dealing with something, just let me know that, and that's cool. So I think saying the things out loud to people really, really matters, especially as a manager, because your words carry more weight because your teams are depending on you for good judgment. And I want people to know exactly what I think on this issue. And so I try to model that for the teams.
You're a unique person though, because you're, a studio manager, studio head, and you're not lower down in the ranks. So it's a little bit different for you. Probably was harder for you to get to where you are because of your illness.
Sure.
But it's a little bit different for you because what I see, and one of the things that I've been talking about over the past couple of years is that this isn't really an HR issue. It's more an issue in regards to, if anything, I feel there's going to be where the world is going to create some sort of new position for internally, something like chief wellness officer or something like that. If you've ever watched the show Billions, the character, the character Wendy, that's what I'm thinking most companies are going to have. She's kind of there as a doctor, but doesn't act officially as a doctor, but is there also as a performance coach and somebody to talk to and things like that. And that's where I think we really should be heading. I think we need to have somebody that's actually going to be representing the gamers or the gaming industry people themselves, not HR, because HR is actually, representing the company.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say yes and no. I think HR has an extremely important role to play here, but I would say that, but that level of care, especially in larger studios who have that capacity, that's true. But I think the most important responsibility really does, as John said, lie with leadership and managers, and that's setting the tone at the top and and also at mid-level management of walking the walk and saying the things, being explicit, and then living that. Being the actual example of balance, of separating work from home, of treating people with clarity, of being open and receptive to employees' needs. And I think that you change the culture. You set that you put aside the idea of passion, and you instead talk about performance and accomplishments and you let people's personal lives be personal, and you do those things, and then you also, in certain companies where there's capacity, you think about how to ensure wellness more broadly. But I cannot overstate the importance of good, strong leadership when it comes to mental health.
We got about maybe a minute left. John, is there anything you'd like to add to this?
I really would like to leave by just letting people know that you're not alone. This is, if you're watching this, the odds are this is something that's of interest to you. Maybe you have an issue yourself, or maybe you have people on your team. What I would say is, don't be afraid to talk openly about this. There should be no stigma about it, given how many people have this. We all go through times in our life that are more difficult than others. Be willing to be open and be willing to, share yourself. And if it doesn't have to be with somebody in the company, I really, really encourage people to just take the time to take care of themselves. This is an issue that can be fixed with therapy, with medicine, with many other methods. But you can be your best self for real. Like, you can feel a lot better than maybe what you're feeling right now, and take the actual time to learn about these things. There is definitely a lot of hope, and this is one of those times when I hope people see mental illness for what it really is, just something that needs to be addressed. And it's not a reason for you to worry about somebody unnecessarily, but it is a reason for you to maybe take an extra second and listen and be available and open to people. So, please do take this seriously. Thank you.
All right, cool. Excellent. All right, we're going to wrap things up. Eve, thank you very much. John, thank you very much. And thanks to Dean at GamesBeat Summit. And that's it. We're off. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Lots of chatter in the Hero Stage Slack room about that topic. Certainly one that is incredibly important, and I'm glad that there are leaders in the video game industry that are treating it as such. We are running just a few minutes behind, so I'm going to go ahead and kick off the next video. It's a discussion that we briefly touched on during the Women in Games breakfast this morning. Diversity and inclusion, how to create virtual and accessible resources for marginalized communities during a pandemic. These ladies will be joining me for live Q&A after their video, so please post your questions in their Hero Stage Slack channel. Welcome the founder of Vogue Leader and host of Disney's Discovery's Expedition X, Jessica Chobot, and the executive director of IGDA Foundation, Nika Nauer.
Hi, everybody. I am your moderator for this fireside chat. My name is Jessica Chobot, and joining me today is Nika Nauer, executive director of the IGDA Foundation. Hi, Nika.
Hey, Jessica. How are you?
Good. Nice to have you. We're going to be discussing the current challenges regarding diversity and inclusion, how to create virtual and accessible resources for marginalized communities during a pandemic. So I guess let's just launch right into it. Nika, for those that are unfamiliar, can you tell us a bit about the specifics of your role and the goals within the IGDA Foundation?
Yeah, the IGDA Foundation is an organization that's meant to serve various communities in the video game industry, such as women, LGBTQ, accessibility, geographic diversity, people of color, and so much more. And really our main purpose is to create a more diverse and inclusive workforce, but also broaden our scope and our mission to the industry abroad. I think we are in an interesting time where we have a lot of conversations about diversity and inclusion, but our purpose is to actually execute on those discussions and bring action to the idea.
And so what does the day-to-day for you look like trying to tackle those issues?
Day-to-day, I mean, we are pretty relentless at the foundation. Our main focus and our main source of programming is that we actually go through a really intense multi-month process of applicants and potential grantees from all sorts of backgrounds, all around the world, all different types of time zones. And we literally go through resumes, potential merit, and we handpick a group of 60 for 3 different programs where we then fly them to GDC and put them through a week's worth of boot camps, mentorship, programming, networking. And obviously that's changed because we don't have conferences this year. We don't have in-person workshops. We have social distancing policies and an entire pandemic going on. Before even coronavirus hit, we were dealing with and negotiating with visa rejections and different government entities who didn't think that their citizens or civilians, didn't believe the fact that they were leaving or coming to the US to actually work in a video game industry. They didn't know that that was a real job. And so for us, it has definitely brought upon a whole new set of challenges. And really now the big question mark for us is, what does accessibility mean today? And what is that going to mean for these communities in the future?
Yeah. So, I mean, you kind of touched upon it a little bit, but like you said, we're in the midst of this pandemic. So what are some of the issues and challenges that have cropped up specifically for the IGDA Foundation now that we're all kind of, stuck at home and don't really have the access that we need to each other?
Well, what's really been interesting for us is juggling and jumbling through time zones. We are a global community. We are a global effort. Literally from running virtual town halls to figuring out what our hardware needs are going to be for grantees, whether or not people have Wi-Fi and accessibility in their home country. In addition to that, our source of partners and our mentors have completely shifted. You have new developers that we haven't worked with before looking to serve as mentors or give back to the community because they're locked in their homes all day and looking for some way to pay it forward. Meanwhile, some of our returning mentors, they're going through their own home life balances. They're trying to figure out, how do I put food on the table and juggle my 3 kids and become an at-home homeschool teacher and try to actually manage my team.
I've recently become a first grade teacher myself, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
So it's not that you're just working like your actual normal job. You've now taken on a lot of other roles in your own home.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so you did mention a little bit with the visa and some countries not really believing that a video game industry job is an actual job. What are some additional roadblocks that had already been in the way for you guys trying to guide and support the developers that you were trying to help?
Yeah, a lot of our main challenges really has been kind of packaging and bringing people, to a conference like GDC and finding support behind them and support for them, because the video game industry is very large. It's not, jobs are not a one size fits all. You don't just show up to become a developer. You have multitudes of areas of interest, whether it's marketing, communications, sometimes legal, narrative design, production work. And the challenge for us is not just going out and finding awesome new talent, but also making sure that we actually retain them in the long haul. If we put a lot of support and effort into a grantee or an individual who's aspiring to be a game developer, and they just have the worst experience in their first job, they're going to leave us. They're going to leave this industry. We're not going to retain those diverse, talented individuals. They'll go off and get swept up by another tech company or a technology adjacent job, and we probably won't see them again. And so we have to literally figure out how we find, it's almost like building a house. We have to build a house sturdy enough to last, but we also have to find bodies to live in them in the long term as well. And so it's a lot of due diligence and it's a lot of effort. But one thing that people always forget is that the foundation is 100% almost volunteer driven. Every single person and the director level, every one of our program leads, they're spending their evenings, they're spending their weekends, they're spending their lunch hours, finding these candidates, putting the time and effort into them, and really making sure that it's supported, because every single person in our foundation really, really believes in creating a workforce with, more than 3 types of people, with having a diverse set of opinions and ideas. And a lot of that just comes from grabbing folks, whether they're coming out of college or maybe a crowd that used to be in the video game industry, had a bad experience, and they're thinking about maybe they'll come back. Maybe they're willing to give it a second go.
Gotcha. So we've talked a lot about the challenges, both when we're not in a pandemic and currently now that we are. So what have been some of the workarounds that you have adopted in order to kind of navigate this new situation that we're finding ourselves in?
So one thing that's been really important for us is to maintain a sense of almost like radical positivity. I think we are really, really fortunate that at the end of the day, our industry is hardwired to, have really good products at home, to actually be wired to the internet, to find ways to work remotely, whether it's through Zoom licensing or Google Hangout or Microsoft Teams. We have just this innate ability to work and be online because our games are online. And we've been using that, whether it's to connect through Animal Crossing or we're slacking at all hours of the day. Some of our grantees for this year are even sharing cosplay photos. I have now literally held virtual town halls and met everyone's dogs, cats, children, babies, and chinchillas.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, I thought that was a new one. And so we've been really making sure that we're staying connected and communicating with one another to figure out and assess what is our next step and how are we going to perhaps develop some sort of new program or new network or new platform that could last not just for this year, but for next year as well. And I think there's an opportunity now to find a way to make our workforce diverse through a virtual platform. And that increases our level of accessibility, not just for now, but in the future. And that's really been the number one question mark, is how do you scale beyond helping 30 people? How do you scale beyond helping 60 people? Now, if we can use this moment to figure out how can we scale beyond 100, 200, 500 people. I mean, that's literally that's the dream, is to figure out how we connect and access all of these people in different parts of the world and get them invested and get them in front of recruiters, talent managers, HR, and say, hey, we've got an awesome pool of talented, young, really gifted, brilliant people that just happen to be from diverse backgrounds. It's not the thing that they start with.
Yeah. So then, you mentioned GDC. A lot of these key games industry events have been postponed due to COVID. How has that affected your current grantees?
It's been really tough. It's been absolutely tough. I mean, when we talk about diversity, it's not just race or gender, it's also economic, it's socioeconomic. And so if you think about it, right, like you grow up your whole life, you actually know you want to be a video game developer. I didn't. I wasn't allowed to play video games in my house growing up. It was not allowed. It was not an industry. It wasn't even applicable for me. But for these guys, for this new generation of leaders, a grant means everything. A stipend is everything, because you can't afford to fly yourself to San Francisco from New Zealand. You don't know how to navigate the city of San Francisco, or for some people, it's a complete sticker shock to see that your salad costs $15, right, in the convention floor. Imagine the different backgrounds, and so they're going through. It's a different type of grieving process. Some of our grantees didn't get to walk their graduations this year, but I can't even fathom, because I remember graduating in the 2008 economy. I absolutely remember what it's like to enter the world, and basically my only job options were to intern for 8 months for free, or work at a fast food restaurant, or go back to grad school and get into some debt, which is literally what I did. And so we don't know where this pandemic is going next. We don't even know that if countries or cities start opening up, what that means for our international grantees. And that's why we're starting to calibrate long-term planning for an alternative way of conducting different levels of training with our grantees, because this isn't sustainable.
Yeah. So, I mean, eventually, so that being said, then, I mean, what have you guys done to pivot, or to start the pivot in order to approach this issue?
So we started to reach out to partners, publishers, independent developers, and we're asking for financial support. We've been looking at volunteer support, and we are literally now looking at workshopping what our next steps look like and what the opportunities are to recreate our GDC experience in a different format. And now the question we're solving for is, how do you create that level of cohort bonding amongst 20 people, amongst 30 people, right? Like, how do you actually navigate that level of collaboration you get, whether it's over a happy hour or a workshop, and what can actually change that? What needs to be done to actually change that dynamic? Is it creating an intramural esports team? Is it figuring out some other way? And so we are literally scraping every source of hardware, tool, technology out there to figure out how we solve for that people-to-people contact, which is what we crave when we go to GDC anyway.
Coming up and bumping up against this wall with COVID that we all have done, has anything taken you by surprise, good or bad, that you didn't expect to have to deal with, besides, dealing with the pandemic?
I think what's been really interesting as a nonprofit is the fundraising aspect. And I know that a lot of our sister and cousin organizations are feeling the same way. The video game industry itself hasn't slowed down, which is awesome. I'm glad that in this industry, my friends, for the most part, it seems like everyone's employed. I have friends that are in different industries, small businesses, retail, some that are in catering and events, and they are, really feeling the pain. And but what surprised me as a nonprofit in this industry is you're now dealing with a wide array of how people look and reevaluate budgets and their way of corporate giving or general donations, right? Because if you're a nonprofit who relies on GDC as a primary source of fundraising, well, you're basically scrambling. Or if you're but also, like, I think the other portion that's fascinating is that streamers are doing extraordinarily well. There's a lot of job security in that market right now. And watching those numbers go up and watching the industry explode through content has been really, really fun to watch.
Very cool. So yeah, moving more into, like, we've talked a lot about the hardships and roadblocks. Have there been any unexpected benefits for developers that you've seen come out of this kind of stay-at-home way of living that we're all experiencing? I mean, you mentioned the streamers, but anything in regards to the foundation and the people that you're directly dealing with?
I think for us, it's different. It's different because, GDC is usually where we are able to connect with each other, with our volunteers. We're able to walk our grantees through it. And, in terms of benefits, I'm still connecting with our team. I'm still connecting with our grantees, but it is, you are still walking through folks, through the idea that a lot of people honestly view GDC, especially aspiring young developers, they really view it as their like one shot into getting in the games industry. And what it's done is helped us recalibrate to demonstrate, like, your entire career doesn't hinge on this. Yes, networking is important, but at the same time, very, very senior developers, very, very senior leaders in our industry weirdly have pockets of time to donate to people, to causes. And I think that's really been the bizarre side benefit, is people that we normally wouldn't be able to connect to or ask for help because they're so busy, have been making themselves more available for sure.
Now, we mentioned budgets before, but we were talking about it as far as donations are concerned. But in regards to budgets, many of the industry individuals and the companies within the industry have found ways to be more cost effective during this time. Since it is kind of, since we're not really sure where everything is headed, if the game industry does follow suit, would you feel that that might open the door for more opportunities in the future?
It could. It absolutely could. My rule of thumb and our rule of thumb at the foundation is we don't make any promises we can't keep. So for us, it's not that I'm not thinking about the future, but I am very, very intentional about today and tomorrow and next week, because things are changing so much day by day. I mean, one day it's literally like you're walking into a store and the next day you're getting an email alert saying, hey, if you're on this university campus, you need to move out of your dorms tomorrow. So we can continue to think about the long-term and potential opportunities, but we also don't really want to waste time imagineering or coming up with ideas that may never come to fruition about the future, because we really don't know. And I think that it's, for us at least, like, it's okay not to know, because there are very concrete next steps that we can take now, which is continue to recruit, help and support from partners and people to ensure that our current class of 2020 IGDA Foundation grantees are going to find jobs in 2021.
And so then what has been, I would say, the foundation's main takeaway having, like, currently going through this?
I think our main takeaway is that, and it's something that I've been working on since I first came into this position last July, is that you really do need to spread out. Like, diversity inclusion is not an effort that happens once or twice a year. It is a time, conferences and events are where people really come together to talk about it. But we are literally working on these issues nonstop every day. And now we're learning how we speak with partners about diversity and inclusion on a daily basis instead of a quarterly basis, and to make it a long-lasting, continuous effort where we're planting seeds so that people are just learning to become more inclusive, especially when doors open back up again. What I constantly aspire to is that, you know, having diversity and inclusion is a mission that is ingrained in your perspective and viewpoint, not a corporate talking point for a press release.
Mm-hmm. Are you afraid that things will just kind of go back to normal and the same challenges that you've had to deal with in the past just haven't adjusted at all?
No, I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm afraid. You have to kind of look at the way human nature works and how human nature interacts. I absolutely remember some of my behaviors and my attitudes that shifted in the 2008 market collapse. I was an incredibly vigorously frugal individual, and I am still that way today. Anytime you look at any studies or research or any trends that occur with people and human nature, you know, after a big development like the one we're going through today, it absolutely sticks with you. You do need entities and organizations like nonprofits, causes, and the foundation to consistently remind people that our work isn't done yet. The video game industry is really behind in making sure that we are working towards a diverse and inclusive workforce. There's no question about it. There's no argument there. And there's just no excuse for anyone being made to feel small or devalued based on their gender, race, religion, creed, background, or the skin that they were born in. Everyone deserves a job based on their merit, and who they are as people should never be an obstacle, ever. And that's really what we're working towards.
Very nice. All right, well, so last question. I mean, we mentioned this briefly before where, you know, the video game industry is kind of hardwired already in order to kind of navigate these stay-at-home waters. So right now, the eyes of the world are on the games industry in a way that they never have been before. I think also because more people are at home playing games, and so they're buying the consoles in order to occupy the time that they have to be stuck at home. The fact that is happening, what can our industry and the foundation specifically be doing to take this moment as an opportunity to grow and move forward?
You know, as we're watching people live in this new normal of isolation, this is absolutely a great educational point for a lot of people. I mean, we are looking at folks that are aging into isolation. We are looking at how people behave online. We are watching some individuals and the new growth of this next generation of gamers learning how to communicate online. This is a great opportunity and a great nexus for us to come up with conducts and codes about how we communicate with one another in a safe way with respect. I think that this is a great element where we can look at whether or not we are evolving as gamers and making sure that we're removing tones and forms of harassment from online, because this is an absolutely beautiful space. I don't understand Animal Crossing. I don't think my personality is wired for it, but I cannot believe how many of my non-endemic gamer friends are playing this game. It's, you know, right? Like, I am absolutely a RPG run through a fantasy land, Will of the Wisps, or in the Blind Forest type player. But if you look at the way that people are connecting through Animal Crossing, if you're looking at the way like streaming numbers are coming up through Valorant, I think it's incredible.
I mean, if you want to get into it, just toss me your friend code. I can just show you around.
I don't get it. Like, you want me to go build an island in a virtual space and then you're going to come visit it? I'm barely trying to fix up my own house. It's
the
stressful.
Most satisfying grind I've ever played. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Nika. Thank you again for joining us as Nika Noor, Executive Director of the IGDA Foundation. This has been how to create virtual and accessible resources for marginalized communities during a pandemic fireside chat. I've been your host, Jessica Chobot. Thank you all for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies, for that discussion. And they are both with me live. Please welcome Nika and Jessica. Now, I have to say, after the way that conversation ended, now I immediately want to talk about Animal Crossing, because I was like you, Nika. I was like, this is not my thing. I've never played Animal Crossing. I'm not doing it. And then my friends won the war of attrition, and I've started my house on my island.
People keep trying to sell me turnips on Facebook. I don't want your turnips.
Jessica, I'm gonna have to have you come visit and show me some pro tips on what I need to do next. I just caught my first 2 tarantulas.
I would love to. Also, just want to humble brag that I made a Mothman dress and have it uploaded. So if anybody's interested in a cryptid style Mothman dress, you can find it. I'll give you the code.
Amazing. Can you please tweet that far and wide so everybody can,
it's on
can
my
run around and
for sure. Yeah, it's out there. I promise.
Awesome. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining me today. We do have some people kicking around in the Hero Stage room. I'll just give them a few minutes to post some questions. But I thought it was really interesting, Nika, what you were talking about. I wrote this note on my little sticky pad because I was like, gosh, it's such a good point. You said it's not an effort that occurs once or twice a year, referring to diversity and inclusion and the effort that needs to go into making it, and how people seem to think, oh, I participated in that one thing, I'm good.
Yeah. It's like people have this and it's like I said, it's human nature. There's a lot when it comes to like, the human's ability to reason through moments, especially through crisis. And it is just very easy to forget. It's very easy to forget the past. For some people, Gamergate was not that long ago. For some people, online harassment, sexist comment, unconscious bias and racism is still a daily thing. But just because you don't see it in the news, or you don't see like such a jarring incident pop up in some feed in some way, doesn't mean it's not happening. And communities and companies really come through and they look at diversity and inclusion with really good intentions. Mm-hmm. But if that's not coming down from top down, if that's not coming down from a C-level priority, or if the person that's being told to, support diversity and inclusion initiatives don't have budget authority or don't have decision-making capabilities in those structures, then you're not really going to see any progress. And that's the point. That's the general point and gist of what I've been trying to get at, and that we're noticing, especially as we're kind of going through the dynamics that we're going through today.
100%. Even the esports panel that was on, just before you, featured one woman on the panel, and Grace was talking about how it's been a challenge that she's noticed, that even something like esports, which seems accessible to a lot of different types of people, still centers around these very masculine ideas and masculine words. She referenced the word like the word king, for example, like as a title of victory, instead of ever using the word queen, because it always feels less than, and things like that, of how there are just these baked in things specific to video games and to, several other industries as well, that feel like, oh, that's just the way that it's always been done. But it's like, well, maybe we shouldn't do it that way anymore. It's like, how do you approach those conversations, particularly at those executive levels and those positions of power, the purse string holders, as you would, and feel comfortable doing that as a woman in the workplace. Something we tried to touch on a little bit in the breakfast this morning. Jessica, I think it would be interesting to hear from you. I'm not sure if this is a yes or no, but have you ever worked at a company that had a diversity officer?
No, I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of.
Do you think that you would have benefited from that, or do you think that that would have maybe encouraged you or inspired you to, make more connections with people in those kinds of environments, knowing that they were sanctioned by the company?
I don't know. I mean, I think it would, yeah, I probably would be a little bit more willing to come forward and have conversations about things that I wanted to change or things that I felt needed to be changed. But then you also run into, it's not just what's made available. I mean, that's definitely a part of it, but also kind of the attitude in life at the moment, right? Like like what is happening around you at that moment. Do you feel like, okay, great, we have the resource here, but am I going to feel comfortable enough to go to that resource and feel like I am legitimately coming to a safe space, or am I being tricked into thinking I'm coming into a safe space, and then letting it all come out, and then all of a sudden later on down the road I end up getting like somewhat punished for it, you know? So it's hard to figure out. I think things, you know, personally I've seen the industry grow a lot from even just when I started. But, you know, I mean, from a hosting perspective in the game space, I mean, it took me 10 years to be even referred to as a host rather than a co-host. And nobody thinks of that as being necessarily a big deal. But from my experience, when you were hosting an event, it was always, the woman was always the co-host and the man was always the host. And it's just little things like that in regards to you referencing the king in esports comment, that it's just like, no, you don't even realize it's bothering you until it's bothering you. And you know, it took me 10 years to speak up about it, and also have a company that I was going to host with take me seriously. And part of that was because every time I came forward with saying, well, no, I want to be referred to as this, it was, you know, I felt very much, and maybe it was my own insecurity about it at the time, but I felt very much like it was either you're making a big deal out of nothing and this is just the way it is, or an eye roll as far as like, oh, well, she's talent, that's, of course she's gonna want, you know. It was never taken, none of these things were taken seriously. And I do feel like, you know, had there have been somebody that I could go to that I felt was sanctioned by a company in order to explore those options, maybe it wouldn't have taken me 10 years to speak up, I guess, is the long way of answering that question.
No, it's not a long way. It required some detailed explanation. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I think it's something that women in all walks of careers in the video games industry suffer from, right? This idea of, I want more for myself, but am I confident, and do I have that space, but safe space enough to actually ask for it and feel that the person I'm going to, that in a position of authority above me, is going to receive it sincerely and genuinely, and not look at me with judgment. Because I think that that is something a lot of women fear, of saying, you know, my feelings are not valid, and that's tragic.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that there's resources like, you know, everything that's happening at IGDA for women to go to. I do want to encourage people who are with us in Zoom here or in the Hero Stage channel on Slack to continue the conversation with Nika and Jessica in the breakout room. But before you ladies go, Nika, I would love to hear if there's a place where developers, investors, other people who are here attending GamesBeat Summit can go to get more information about what you are doing at IGDA Foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. A great website and resource is igdafoundation.org, or Slack us. But I would love to actually make a quick plug. On Giving Tuesday, this May 5th, 4 awesome nonprofits take this IGDA Foundation, Global Game Jam, and the Online Harassment Fund, all female executive director run, are coming together for a Stay in the Game Relief Fund. We are running a 2-week campaign to support not just diversity inclusion efforts, but also issues around mental health to support our community and our diverse grantees. And we are basically fundraising to make sure that we survive throughout this current COVID-19 era that we are in. I will kick those details into the Slack for those interested in corporate matching or donating early, so that the pot is a little bit full when we kick it off on Tuesday. And those efforts would really go a long way. We even have a scrappy quarantine video that we put together last week, so I will share that.
Absolutely. Plug away. What a fantastic initiative. I look forward to checking in on Tuesday. Well, thank you so much, ladies, and enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you for your discussion.
Thanks, you too.
All right, we are going to keep rolling with our next discussion, but I wanted to mention that we'll be taking just a short, approximately 5-minute break after this next panel. So if you want to, take a moment to get up and stretch your legs, you can definitely do that, and then we will be back at 3:45 with our next piece of content. So for right now, I'm going to send you to our next piece of content, which I was mentioning. It's called Blockchain Comes to Games Part 2. We have a panel moderated by James Zhang of Concept Art House, featuring Sebastian Borriet of The Sandbox, Peter Kielteka, of Horizon Blockchain Games, Eric Schiermeyer of Blockchain Game Partners, and Taehoon Kim of Nue, here to talk about blockchain, as if I didn't say blockchain enough then. It's almost a drinking game, everybody. All right, enjoy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Blockchain Comes to Games Part 2. I'd like to start off with a quick round of introductions. My name is James Zhang. I'm the CEO and founder of Concept Art House. We're a high-end art service provider. I'm also a partner at Fifth Era, where we just closed our second round of Fund to Funds Blockchain, where we back some amazing VCs like Blockchain Capital, 1KX, IDEO, Pantera. And I'm going to go live. And Peter, can you introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Peter Kielteka, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Horizon Blockchain Games. And we're working on video games in the blockchain era, focusing on a title called Skyweaver and building an underlying platform that we named Arcadium.
Great. Eric?
Hi, everybody. My name is Eric Schiermeyer. I was one of the founders of Zynga most recently, and now I'm the CEO and co-founder of Gala Games. Our first project is Townstar.
Excellent. Sebastian?
Hi, I'm Sebastian. I'm CEO and co-founder of The Sandbox, a decentralized virtual gaming platform running on the Ethereum blockchain. And I'm also the newly elected president of the Blockchain Game Alliance.
Thank you. TK?
Hi, my name is Taehoon Kim. People call me TK. I'm CEO and co-founder of Nue. We specialize in competitive multiplayer games across multiple platforms. Our games include Chronoblade, Power Rangers Legacy Wars, which was the first multiplayer PvP only game on mobile, and Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, the first fighting game to have full cross-play and cross-progression across all major gaming platforms.
Thanks, everyone. Before we go to the panelists, I want to kind of give a preamble on where we are. So this is Blockchain Comes to Games Part 2. Part 1 was last year, GamesBeat 2019. We had a great panel, and it was Kevin Chu with Forte, it was Roy Liu with Tron, Miko Matsumura with Gumi Crypto, and Arthur Madrid with The Sandbox. And we spoke about the promise of blockchain, what it can provide, aligning incentives between game developers and their players. We asked questions about consensus and, of course, mass adoption. Yeah, so that was our panel from last year, and a lot has happened in the past year. So, of course, there's a ton of cryptocurrency volatility. This is Bitcoin. We reached a high of almost 14,000. Last year during this panel, it was about 5,000. Today, we're about almost 7. So that's an increase of 30 billion in market cap for Bitcoin. And there's a lot of great momentum. So blockchain projects and blockchain gaming projects are still getting great funding. Mythical raised 19 million, Immutable raised 15 million, Dapper Labs and Forte has some exciting news. And yeah, but there's a number of challenges too. So speed and scalability continue to be an issue, onboarding of new players, legality and regulatory matters. Like just a couple of weeks ago, SEC ruled a preliminary injunction against Telegram that prevented their $1.7 billion sale. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so let's get a pulse on where we are today versus a year ago. Can you summarize for us where we are today in terms of solving for scalability? And like, where are we in making it easier for people to play games on the blockchain? Maybe Peter, we'll start with you.
Yeah, totally. So it's kind of cool to think that, blockchain is just a recent discovery. Ethereum was made less than 5 years ago. And, it's the kind of the notion where everyone's really excited about is that you can take an application or a network and actually transform it and have it function as an economy. But the technology, which is obviously like a bit of the challenge in like any kind of new emerging technology, is this blockchain thing resembles like a computer from the 80s. So it's slow, it's difficult to build on. But gaming obviously is a really strong candidate given its kind of virtual currency market to blockchain. And I think the kind of main kind of question when thinking about that, and obviously that's why I'm kind of framing it with the gaming perspective, is to think what part of a video game, or how do you put a video game on the blockchain? Because kind of the idea would be as there's a lot of blockchains being developed. There's Ethereum, there's Tron, there's so many. The kind of consideration, and a lot of them are designed to be kind of general purpose, kind of like virtual machines. The consideration is really like, how do you tailor a video game to be functioning on a blockchain? So the question is, what part of a game belongs on the chain? So I would argue to say that the key is, as we have in the traditional industry now, it's really the items that belong on the chain, so that they can be owned and they can be traded, and they can be represented in a kind of on a shared network. In terms of the gameplay, this is obviously like the major concern, whereas the gameplay itself would have the major scalability challenges. Not to say though, however, that even in the world of items, minting, transfer, and exchange is also something that really has scalability challenges, especially in a decentralized network. So kind of where we are, when you're thinking about like what's very achievable and what gets me really optimistic about this kind of space and where we are right now, although it's a very nascent like time of technology, is for the purpose of minting, transfer, and exchange of virtual items and a standard representation. It's completely viable even on something like Ethereum 1.0, and of course, while still maintaining that decentralization. And specifically, I would kind of pinpoint, obviously, it's kind of the advancements of things like the ERC 1155, which has a very efficient data structure for these things, meta transaction relayer systems, and more specifically, advancements in layer 2 technology under the name of optimistic rollups. And there's like pretty much like 8 teams working on this technology. So I'll kind of happy to talk about those more, but I'll kind of leave it at that. And of course, there's lots of incredible research. Given the open kind of source nature of our ecosystem, the whole world is solving this problem and working towards this problem, which is just an amazing thing. But I'll just pinpoint that optimistic rollup is a true layer 2 that is something that really the community will really benefit from to kind of live out this vision, for us.
So Peter is saying we're getting closer. We're having sophisticated games. The protocols are able to provide. We're getting to the point where our scalability is to the point we're kind of really sophisticated gaming. Who else? Eric, you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. I agree. I think that we are becoming more sophisticated in how we're thinking about using the blockchain, based on just everything that I know. People are working on what we're doing. But for me, the way it feels right now is we don't yet know if things are going to scale. It kind of feels to me like I'm skiing down in a fog bank, and I don't know if I'm going down a groomed run or if I'm about to hit some moguls. When one of us gets a game that has 100 million users, I fully expect everything to break at this point.
You would have some experience with that. And the second part of my question was about onboarding new players, right? Like as of about a year ago, it's still pretty clumsy to play a blockchain game. Like you have to create a wallet, you have to buy cryptocurrency. How far have we come in a year to solve this issue? We'll start with Sebastian. Oh, you're on mute.
There's been great progress over the last year in like how blockchain games are thinking their onboarding user experience journey. And the fact that we are moving from CryptoKitties kind of games that started in 2017, so it's just 2 years ago, and these games are purely happening with crypto collectible on the blockchain, to more traditional games putting product first, putting user first, and then the blockchain and the technology and all the technical thing that Peter mentioned, and probably most of our audience wouldn't even know about unless they are deep in our space. I think it's a great progress. And having wallets that the players don't even know that are wallets, because they just create an account with an email and password, and their solution like Bitsky, like Taurus, you just log in with your Facebook, Google, Twitch, or Discord account, and it takes 2 seconds literally to be in the game, have a wallet, and play regularly, even knowing that you're in a blockchain game. That's really what's going to bring facilitate the adoption behind. And with our platform on Sandbox, we already have 10,000 of user accounts created, having a wallet. And I would say just 30% are using MetaMask, the old way of accessing blockchain games. So there's great progress already, and we are not yet live. So it makes me quite excited.
TK, did you want to?
Yeah, I agree with Sebastian on a lot of those points. For us, I think the question of mass adoption comes in two parts. The first part is that in order for more gamers to play games that use blockchain technology, there needs to be great games that use blockchain technology. And for gamers, games come first, and the technology is behind the curtain. It's invisible to the gamers. And the great player experience, fun gameplay, features that provide a new game experience to the users is that was those type of experiences that was difficult to achieve before blockchain will definitely be able to help. In other words, if blockchain is able to bring in new experiences, I think players will be curious to try it out. The second part is in order for great games to exist that utilize blockchain technology, great game developers need to also jump in and make games that use blockchain technology. So great game developers tend to put game experience and gameplay first, and implementing blockchain can potentially be a barrier for both development and for player adoption. So as better technology and tools are developed to support game developers, I think if that happens, I think we'll see more game developers adopting blockchain technology to build great games, and then that will also produce an outcome where more gamers will adopt.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, thank you for that. I remember just trying to play EOS Nights. I mean, geez, it was like 30 minutes before I could even start the game. It was, I mean, it's a really good Pioneer game, but it just took a lot of work. And I was just thinking, you already, the kids aren't going to play this game. It's really hard. And so after hearing TK and I had a chat about this yesterday, and he was saying now, if you were to play, it's just a game. The blockchain component comes later. So you can have this great in-game economy. You can buy this, you can earn this order in the game, but you only create the wallet if you want to sell it or trade it for value. So it seems like that does lower the barrier to entry. Anyway, very cool. I would also like to ask each of you what's your biggest challenge you're facing, and then also what excites you most about building games in this space. Maybe we have a limited time. Maybe keep it to about a minute or so. Again, Peter, we'll start with you. Can you talk about Skyweaver, what you're doing versus, say, Hearthstone or Gods Unchained?
Yeah, for sure. So we're obviously very excited about building a video game, this next generation of the internet, and being a part of creating great content, like TK was saying, on these things in a way where the blockchain is invisible and it's kind of no knowledge of blockchain is required. You just get to, enter this world and kind of share these new incentives. So we kind of started on that journey back in 2018. So by starting on Skyweaver. And so Skyweaver is a trading card game that also has a multiplayer worldwide competitive ladder. So the cards themselves of what we have in the set, it's a 500 card launch set designed by Jonathan Laux, who is our lead game designer for the actual game mechanics. And he previously was working on Magic the Gathering and even worked on Legends of Runeterra, which is pretty cool. And we obviously, when we looked at this, is we wanted to create an economy where players could own their cards, they could trade them, and they could even win competitive rewards just playing a competitive ladder. The game itself is completely free, and it's also, we have this kind of aspect of play to earn. So as you're every single week in the leaderboard, if you're actually ranked in the top 1,000, that leaderboard is where we actually mint this currency called Weave, and then we distribute it to the top players. These players can then convert their Weave into gold cards that, of course, are digital assets on the Ethereum blockchain, and they can use them for gameplay. So we really spent a lot of time thinking about an economy that would be healthy and designed for players to have these rewards and have it functioning with, obviously, these markets. The gameplay itself, of course, so there's this whole blockchain thing, which is invisible. And as Sebastian was kind of alluding to earlier, it's important that, the experience, it just feels like a normal game, but while still maintaining, of course, all the kind of security aspects of ownership, which are really kind of critical. And that's kind of the challenge, I think, to kind of have all these pieces really well orchestrated together. But of course, you can't ignore the gameplay and how important that is, right? The gameplay has to stand on its own, because if you have all this great economy ideas or technology, yet the game doesn't kind of create the demand, then it's all kind of, there's a kind of a cool proof of concept, but it doesn't actually make it as, a real title that really breaks through. And our goal is to really have something that breaks through in the space, and that's what we aspire to. And so we're really also pleased with the gameplay that Jonathan's created. How it differs, let's say, from a Hearthstone or a Gods Unchained, is that in our cards, we actually have attached spells. So we find that, any card, as you can actually see in this Olympia card on the right, I'm not sure which one, what the card's called that she has on herself, but she has this attached spell that she can actually play when she's in the field, and you can kind of have deeper strategies and extra combos. It's really cool. There's an interesting tempo to Skyweaver, which of course is a turn-based strategy game similar to in the genre of other trading card games. So we're really happy with the gameplay, obviously, and how it compares to Hearthstone and Gods Unchained. But also, like, specifically to Hearthstone, Hearthstone is really a collectible card game, whereas Skyweaver is a tradable card game. And the distinction there, of course, is that in Hearthstone, you can only collect. And when you purchase something from their store, you cannot resell it. In Skyweaver, you can full-on trade your cards. These are actually digital trading card games. So it's funny because in the world that lives right now, what I'll give credit to, of course, to Gods Unchained is that it is also a trading card game. You can trade your cards, which is really cool. And they're also on Ethereum, which is great. And they've done a lot of really great work. Where we differ a lot, of course, is we've obviously built a completely original game. We from where we started back 2 years ago, we kind of made some choices. We have a very vastly different economy design, obviously also vastly different game design, but there are some obviously overlapping mechanics that as you'd have overlapping mechanics in any other like first-person shooter or something.
I love your passion, man. Thank you. We'll come back to that. Yeah, I'm a long-term Hearthstone player, Magic the Gathering player, and Skyweaver looks very exciting. Well, Eric, I mean, you helped found Zynga, and this is the image that I put up for Townstar. Yeah, tell us about what you've learned, like lessons in building Farmville and Zynga, and how that applies to Gala Games and Townstar.
Sure. Well, first, I just think I should invoke Michael McCarthy here. He was the creative director for Farmville 2, and he's the creative vision behind this game. But to specifically your question, man, what did we learn? I would say the single most important thing that anyone who's listening might want to know about what I learned around Farmville was that you never want to break your K factor. And if you start going viral, you need to do whatever you can to keep it going. Back when we were launching games on the Facebook platform, if our servers fell down, and this was before AWS, virality was over, the network effect was done. So, one of the things that I would say I'm honestly most concerned about is that we get a breakaway hit. One of us gets really, really lucky, I guess, or is very skillful, and something happens, and it's out of our control. And so that was the one thing, So I hear a lot of people talking about being really intelligent about what they're putting on the blockchain versus what they're not putting on the blockchain. I think it's really important. My hope is that one of us gets massive adoption, because once that happens, we all win together. And so that's what we're really trying to do here in Townstar. There's some fun, kind of like interesting things that we're doing inside the game. So, for example, the only way to get the tokens inside the game is to actually own this farm bot. And the farm bot will go out onto the map, and it'll find, you'll find coins, you mine them, bring them back, and then we're gonna have like rewards for people to share the game, little like fountains, and all of these items will be on the blockchain.
How close is that to launch?
Well, so we're officially in beta right now. So it went into beta just yesterday or 2 days ago. I would say that we're really close. We're right now, I just actually had a development meeting. We're talking about minting all of the items that need to be actually on the blockchain. So that should be happening really soon.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah.
Sebastian, let's talk about Sandbox. Tell us about your land pre-sale and how you plan to compete with like Roblox and Minecraft. The game looks great.
Thank you. So, a strong vision behind Sandbox Metaverse is to offer a truly decentralized economy where the games and the content is built by the community, controlled by it, and every user who participates in our plan can benefit from its participation. It's really UGC focused. And as part of this vision of a metaverse, we have a map with a limited number of land parcels, a total 166,464, which are unique ERC 721 tokens open to ownership by the players and game creators. The game creators will need those land to publish their creation. So you can compare it to sort of like an app store where there's a limited number of spots for every game to be featured. And this is public, provable on the blockchain. We did run 3 rounds of pre-sale so far, selling progressively 2.5 and 5% and 10% of its total map supply. And it's been a massive success so far. Our last third round pre-sale, which happened on March 31st, sold out for the equivalent of $450,000, 3,400 ETH by then, within just 5 hours, having literally thousands of users buy those land, and you could see each of those parcels becoming a green point on the map and being sold so quickly, which shows that there's a strong demand and expectation around what we are building, not just because of the value of this land and the digital scarcity attached, but because of the game behind and the strong vision we have. And how we're planning to compete with Minecraft and Roblox, which are games that exist for more than 10 years and have over 100 million of active users, is through our, I think, a strategy of key partnership, like you're showing with Atari, the gaming company, the gaming giant, is one of our partner, and they will be building this virtual theme park on our virtual world platform, allowing players to come, chat, social, interact, and play all the games from Atari lineup, including Roller Coaster Tycoon or the retro classic like Pong or Super Breakout, etc., in this new voxel kind of design. And we are also Square Enix as one of our investors, Square Enix being also one of the largest video game company behind the franchise Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy. And we have more bigger gaming company coming, and that will be publishing games on our virtual world as well. So through this partnership and this gaming company, we expect to reach to potentially millions of players who are just interested in those traditional big games. And I see it almost as kind of a console lineup. So essentially allowing creators to own their creator truly own their creation with through NFTs, monetize them, and attract players, which I believe will be the largest portion of our audience, with our partnership with gaming partners, is potentially what can put us on our road toward 1 million and more users for this next coming decade.
Thanks, Sebastian. Appreciate it. And TK, sorry to cut a little short. We're starting to run low on time, but can you tell us about what you're doing with Enway and Forte? And Forte was a big presence on our panel last year.
Sure, I'll try to be quick. So at Enway, we specialize in developing competitive multiplayer games across multiple platforms, and we've been interested in blockchain technology for a while to bring innovation on monetizing and pricing of competitive multiplayer games. Even before we met with Forte. For instance, how do we reduce friction for participation in pricing of in-game events and tournaments at a global scale, and how to find new ways to monetize real-time PvP games without resorting to pay-to-win tactics. So we will have a lot more to say about the partnership with Forte and our specific game that we're developing later this year. Can't announce anything yet, but what we can say is that we're both aligned in our thinking that a game-first approach versus a technology-first approach is a key to mass adoption. As we said earlier, players generally don't care about what technology is behind the scenes. They mainly care about the experience they're having with their friends. And Forte's team has deep experience in game and economy design.
Are they using their own tokens, or are they using Ethereum, or can you talk about that?
They have, they use, open protocols like, Ethereum and Interledger. But I can't get into specifics. That's more of a question for Forte.
Well, I think, I'd like for us to spend a moment and talk about the different protocols, right? These are Ethereum, there's Tron, there's EOS, there's EOS. What did you guys go with, and how should a new developer think about what protocol to build on? Eric, let's start with you on this one. What are you guys building on, and why did you choose that?
Sure. So we're building on Ethereum right now, and we chose that because of the various contracts that we could we could be using. We're going to be using the 1155 right now. I think one of the things you need to think about, though, is the platform that you're using headed towards legal trouble? Unfortunately, we have to really think about that now.
We do.
It's really too bad for us because they were the most obvious use case for the blockchain. But I think before we got there, we ended up having a lot of bad actors take advantage of the situation. It kind of reminds me of early internet days. But yeah, so if you're thinking about a platform, you really need to think about whether or not the SEC is going to be coming after you, or the parent company.
Yeah, we should. I mean, we should have to talk about that. Does anybody else want to weigh in on EOS or Tron? I mean, there was a lot of debate that Ethereum is actually the slower of the different protocols. Yet there's more apps being developed.
I actually had a conversation with Joe Lubin where I told him I said that Ethereum couldn't do it.
Yeah,
and he assured me that it can, but we'll see what happens.
And I believe Peter, you, Sebastian, both of you are building on the ERC tokens, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Actually, in fact, on ERC 1155, it's interesting. All three of us are. Our team actually co-authored the standard. I know, in fact, so does Sebastian. His team kind of contributed to it. And I don't know what contracts you're using, Eric, but I'm going to email you after this. Happy to chat with your team. Honestly, I'd love to cross some notes.
Let's do it.
Yeah, totally, man. And I think it's certainly. I think in any the distributed systems isn't really a computer science problem. It's a physics problem. And there's certain laws of physics you cannot break. And so that's why Ethereum, although you have slower throughput or you have a greater level of latency, but you have a greater level of decentralization. So when you look at things like an EOS or a Tron or any other network, they're making some trade-off. It's impossible to not, unless you're bending laws of physics, which I don't think they are. So the consideration is how you design things in to be efficient and really tailor specific to what you're looking to build for, to design for. And you can get very far in being really careful. Now, I think, at a mass scale adoption, that's not always how developers think, to be so precise and optimizing code when you're developing. They're just creating something as an application developer, which is also kind of why I would say, which is also why the community is important, to create strong standard libraries that people can build upon that are trusted, to think of smart contracts really as protocol extensions of the base layer, not necessarily as application logic. So I think these sort of things are also important, and there's a lot of great innovation. So I think the important factor for me and why, and I'm not gonna, there's lots of great work happening all around the world across all the different teams, and people are experimenting and figuring it out. But the why I chose Ethereum is just has the greatest level of an unwavering focus of decentralization, and that's important to me because if I'm building an open economy, I want to make sure that the foundation I'm building upon isn't going to change on me. And then I can, offer that, and having decentralization and non-custodial design. All these things are really key for me to, for legal compliance, but also to kind of fulfill this promise.
Thanks, Peter. By the way, Dean just joined us, and we're really running out of time. But I want to ask one more question that Eric alluded to earlier. There's a huge spotlight on blockchain and cryptocurrency right now. Just a couple of weeks ago, SEC halted Telegram's public sale. That's a $1.7 billion token sale that's now being stopped. What's the ripple effect of that? Is that going to affect developers? Obviously, it's pointing a finger at all the ICOs that were done in 2017. Do you expect that we're going to be impacted as developers?
I'll take that one for now. My belief is that we all here are fundamentally good actors, and that if the SEC decides to go after the blockchain gaming industry, I think at the core, what they're really attacking is the game industry as a whole. So when you really get down into what are we really talking about in terms of the legalities of it, what we could be, I think, dinged on in terms of the Howey test or something like that. So many game companies nowadays are I think vulnerable to that. So unless they're willing to destroy, $150 billion industry, which I doubt, I think as long as we all maintain our good actor status, we'll probably be okay. That's my sense of it. But it's really confusing right now, and there needs to be some clarity.
Sebastian or TK, do you guys want to weigh in? Peter?
Yeah, I agree with everything Eric's saying, and clearly he's done his research. I think it's as long as you operate really well, you have to consider things like loot boxes or booster packs, in the consideration of an asset, with secondary trade and custodial versus non-custodial design. I think if you just really do it properly, there's nothing you're doing illegal is kind of the point, right? But I think but that is kind of mixed. And what is the 90% case of people doing things? Almost the norm is to do things not properly.
Guys, we're over on time, and I have like at least two or three other questions. So with that, we'll wrap up Blockchain Comes to Games Part 2. Thank you all for participating, and I'll see you guys for Q&A on the Slack channel. And thanks to GamesBeat for hosting us again. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for that discussion. As he mentioned, they are going to be in the Hero Stage Q&A breakout room. I believe they are in that room right now. So if you have more questions or would like to continue the discussion on blockchain in the video games industry, you can go ahead and head on over. Just as a reminder, if you need those links, once again, they are in the announcements channel in the GamesBeat Summit Slack. But let's do a quick poll on the subject of blockchain, shall we? What do you guys think? If you guys are watching in the Zoom room, there will be a little poll that pops up. Are blockchain games viable? This is an easy one. Is it yes or is it no? I'll give you guys a second to answer. I just wanted to remind everybody that there are individual topic channels in the GamesBeat Summit Slack workspace that you can take advantage of. They're a great way to connect with other attendees on such topics as investment, startups, or business development. And overwhelmingly, blockchain games are indeed viable. I think that was an easy yes, I have to say. Well, thank you again to the gentlemen. If you want to continue that conversation, you can head to the breakout room now. So at this moment, we're going to take a short break to hear from our sponsors. We will be back at 3:45 with our next panel.
Jam City is the creative powerhouse behind some of the most popular, top-grossing games in the world. We're home to the most talented artists and creators in the world. They create universes with art, design, and storytelling that are fun for everyone. It comes down to always thinking about the player experience, to focus on the magic and the measure. At Jam City, our product next week has to always be better than the week before.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I hope you got a chance to stand and stretch your legs there for a few minutes. But we are continuing on here on the hero stage at GamesBeat Summit 2020. Our next panel is about the massive market to the east and how to bring your games to China. Moderated by Lisa Cosmas Hansen of Nico Partners, with Bill Wang of Giant Network, Amy Wang of Mattel 163, and Cynthia Du, VP of Cocos. Please welcome them to discuss games in China. Demand doesn't cease.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the GamesBeat Summit Asia Games panel. My name is Lisa Cosmas Hansen, and I am the president of Nico Partners. We are a market research firm that's covering the video game industry in Asia. And I am honored to be here with my esteemed panelists, who are all experts in the China games market specifically and beyond. Not that they don't limit themselves to China, but China is an important topic for all of us these days and all the time. So today we are going to focus on the market of China and the subject of games to see where we are during COVID-19 and where we're going in the future. So we'll have some questions. And first I'd like to introduce to you our panelists. Bill Wong is the CEO of Skystone Games, a new gaming company co-founded with David Brevik, the creator of Diablo and former president of Blizzard North. They invest in talented studios and publish those games on PC, console, and mobile platforms. He lives in the Bay Area, as do I. Amy Huang is CEO of Mattel 163, the joint venture gaming company between Mattel and NetEase. Mattel 163 has published popular card games such as Uno and Phase 10 on mobile. Amy is in Beijing right now, running development and marketing teams in Hangzhou and LA. Cynthia Du is currently the vice president of Cocos, the biggest open source game engine developer in the world. She is in charge of the global game developers ecosystem, which includes marketing, new distribution platforms, support, and forums. Cynthia has worked in Cheetah Mobile and Oasis Games as the managing director of Game Ads subsidiaries and was the co-founder of Cinetive, a playable advertising solution company. And finally, Jeff Linden is a co-founder, the president, and a director of Shenzhen iDream Sky. He has almost 20 years of experience in the games industry. He is primarily responsible for overseeing the import of games and other content, overseas business development, and international strategic investments of the company. He's also the president of the Shenzhen Esports Association, elected there in November 2018, and served as the honorary advisor of the Hong Kong Esports Limited and honorary president of Macau Esports Federation. So I have all these great talents sitting here with me for this panel, and I couldn't be happier about that. Some of them are sitting in China, and some of them are sitting in the US. So let's just start. I want to go around the panel and ask everybody for one word or one sentence about what you think about gaming in China during COVID-19 or for the future after COVID-19. And why don't we just start with Bill?
Sure. Well, during this lockdown period, gaming has been a silver lining and hitting record high.
Okay, thank you. And Cynthia?
Well, for me, I think the gaming industry is actually a bit struggling, especially when we check on the Chinese game developers, because it's really hard to get ISBN. And also, if they publish on App Store, is a lot of restriction there again about the ISBN. So there are Chinese developers that are actually trying to go overseas. So we think that actually the environment has been a little bit struggling for the developer.
Okay. And Jeff?
Well, I think the industry itself is flourishing due to COVID-19 because players are playing more games. However, from business level and operation level, China is also struggling because of the new changes that COVID-19 have bring to everyone here.
Yeah, everyone globally, it seems.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Amy, how about you? Some comments about gaming in China and COVID-19 or post-COVID-19?
We've seen a rise in the user base during this period due to everyone being home. But that being said, there's a lot of regulation restrictions these days, and certainly a lot of international political clashes going on. So that's impacting what's going on with the policies in China. So while the users have a need for entertainment online, and they want to be connected with each other, but it certainly has its challenges in dealing with the new rules that's coming out every day.
Right. Yeah. Well, some of these comments, I feel like China is always such a huge market and still growing, and we see the data come out that looks like some of the major companies are still growing, and maybe that's just based on people staying at home so much. But on the other hand, it seems like there'll be less disposable income since people were out of work. And yes, these regulatory issues are problematic and cause companies from all over the world to wonder, how do I get things done? And I think with that in mind, one of the questions I have for you is, how can foreign developers build a relationship with a domestic publisher in China from afar if travel is not possible in order to get a game licensed and then submitted for an ISBN? In this relationship-heavy guanxi world in China, what do you think is going to happen if the companies can't fly around and talk to each other? How about Amy?
That's a very good question. It certainly is challenging. You can't connect with people in person. So I would suggest, using your existing network and just to reach out as much as you can virtually. That's what all of us are doing at this point.
Cynthia, do you think that people will, do you think it'll be harder to strike deals? Do you think that there will still be deal making over the next several months if there is not a lot of travel or the opportunity to build a relationship? Where's the trust going to come from?
Well, first of all, turn on the camera when you do the call with each other. To be honest, it's definitely going to be difficult because the time zone difference. Yeah. So to get a meeting online and to talk about deals, especially some important deals, we're still learning on this part. On my background is always, on my previous experience is always turn on the camera so you can look at each other on the face. So you understand, based on their facial expression, you can have a, understanding whether the person can be trusted or not. But to be honest, it's not too much other ways you can do.
Okay. Yeah.
Well,
so Lisa, go ahead.
Sorry, Bill. I think, irrespective of COVID-19, pre-COVID-19 or post-COVID-19, it has been getting harder and harder for foreign developers to publish the game in China. And I mean, looking at this panel right now, this is most likely already 50% of the people that most foreign developer will be talking to if they need to come into China. Because there's only that few windows from each company, and there's only that few companies in China that have the capabilities and also capacity and understanding of bringing foreign games into China. It's definitely going to be harder to strike deals, even more so because of the travel the travel situation right now. But I believe a lot of developers, like if you're already AAA developers, bigger platforms, you already have established partnerships in China, either with some of the big guys or the middle tier guys, which I think in that front, the effect will be much less. It will be more of an efficiency problem. But definitely for the newer ones that have not explored in China, have virtually no network or no visibility to Chinese publishers and partners, it will get harder for them to be noticed by Chinese publishers to strike deals. So I think as advice to foreign developers, I would say if you are new to the industry or you just started your company, then going through your LinkedIn network and finding the right guy to bring you to the other right guy to have a discussion about how to get into China would be what you need to do for now.
Right. Interesting. Okay, thank you. And Bill, you wanted to say something too.
Oh, sure. Well, in our industry, content is king. So if you have great content, I'm very sure you get a lot of attention from the people on this panel and other people in the industry. So it will get a lot of phone calls. I want to see travel restriction just more inconvenience for doing business with Chinese publishers. The bigger issue is about government's restriction on new license numbers. So in year 2019, there were about 1,400 titles received approval from government. So only about 13%, 185 are foreign titles. So for this year, the number may drop to about 1,200. So in conjunction with long wait time for foreign titles, which range from 9 months to 1 year, so local publishers are less likely to publish overseas titles than before.
Yeah, well, the demand is still there, and I hope that the supply can meet the demand. And it seems like the Chinese gamer community is a very resourceful bunch. From what we've seen, they find a way to play the games, and they find a way to consume the content that they're interested in. So I hope that it becomes possible for international trade in games, including China, to continue this year. I'm sure it will. Everything's just a little more tedious at the moment due to the international situation. Speaking of turning on your video, which is a wise suggestion that Cynthia made, we've been noticing that streaming video, especially game streaming video, is like incredibly popular in China. And there's been a lot of usage of streaming video over the past couple of months and, over the past few years. But this is not slowed down at all, with the exception of the one day of mourning when everything was slowed down. But what do we think about the future of streaming video for games in general, COVID or no COVID? Do you think this is a phenomenon that is part and parcel of the success of the industry in China and even outside of China? So I'm talking about Douyu or Twitch or Huya or any of the others, take your pick. How about we ask Amy first?
Well, actually, our game is very casual. We have card-based games, so that represents classic board games. So I think this the streaming of the games is more relevant to more of the mid to hardcore types of esports games that people watch for entertainment and for competitiveness. So I can't speak very much to this point, but I do want to say that for our game, people want to have that live connection with people and the real-time playing. So that's something that we've seen a huge demand in for our games.
Oh yeah, so the social element, the community and connection is never going to go away. I think people will take advantage of any technology that allows them to be connected and live at the same time. How about Jeff? What do you feel about streaming video and for games, and maybe taking these esports tournaments online instead of offline and so forth? What are you seeing in connection with your work, or just your observation being there?
Yeah, I mean, China have been leading the charge on being a connected country. Obviously a lot of these technologies started in the West, but when it hits China, it hits on a much bigger scale, and the adoption rate is much higher. When we look at esports and when we look at other part of the gaming industry, in terms of streaming, China have been leading charge on how to monetize streaming. China have been leading charge on viewership, the view length for users. So in terms of being a virtual esports tournament per se, in 2019, actually, when I was Macau actually hosted one of the biggest Asia championship for PUBG. And we have a big arena in the Kodai arena and casinos, and we have more than like 3,000. I think it was a 3 days tournament with roughly around 3,000 guests that fly from all parts of the world. But in terms of the online viewership, we're talking about like 10 million users at one point, CCU. So obviously, I think the online esports viewing in China and tournament is already there. Now, if in terms of being the player, not playing on site and playing at home, I think the bigger question would be anti-cheating and how do we monitor a player that is playing by himself or playing on the right device. The game client is not hacked. There's no extra help on the side.
Yeah.
I think that will be something that we will need to look into. But I think from a viewer perspective, I think it's already there. Pre-COVID-19, we're already there.
Yeah, I think it was set up well for that. But you make a really good point about the integrity of the tournaments. Bill, do you have any comments about the integrity of the tournaments, or what you think might evolve if something goes awry with the tournaments online in China? It might spill over to the rest of the world, because it's obvious that Asia is the heart of esports globally, and China is the pulse of that heartbeat. So what do we think about China being a thought leader and an action leader? How can we mitigate that risk, and what other thoughts might you have on esports?
Well, we'll see Chinese players already embrace the esports online. So Tencent League of Legends Pro League started the online tournament last month. And on the first day, the viewership reached over 100 million. And Honor of King, another big game made by Tencent, their league started online on March 18th. And they got over 62 million peak concurrent viewership. The left side, as you mentioned, online tournaments face a lot of issues. It's very difficult to make competition fair when pro players are scattered around the country and have different hardware and internet connectivity at home. So that's a big issue. But online streaming, that's the trend for the future. We see Douyu and Huya have big traffic jump back to February. They have over 30% to 40% increase. So live streaming is a bright spot and will stay there even after the outbreak of coronavirus is over.
Okay, great. Thank you. So as we're talking about some spending and observing games and playing and watching and streaming, it makes me think about how any changes that might have happened in ad revenue or in in-app purchases in games during COVID, or if these changes are here to stay. And Cynthia, I think you might be a great person to lead us off here with an answer. What kind of data has your company observed, or what are your feelings about how IAP and advertising revenue might have changed over time?
Yeah, so because our company, we do provide like a distribution platform for a lot of mobile vendors to provide the gaming content. Like because we before we designed an operational system called Runtime with WeChat together, so we supported WeChat mini game platform, and then we later on we sold this operational system to like Oppo, Vivo, all of those mobile phone vendors and some mobile phone vendors overseas. So we can see actually both in China and in overseas in terms of the ads revenue and in-app purchase. So the interesting thing is that in the very beginning of pandemic situation, we see actually a huge increase on the in-app purchase, and both in-app purchase and ads advertisement. And then it's actually increased a lot. And then after like 2 weeks, and then this advertisement is slightly going down. Also the in-app purchase. So we now see for advertisement, we see like 20% drop based on the compared with the peak. And then for the in-app purchase, the interesting thing is that during the weekday, we don't see that much of in-app purchase. But during weekends, we see actually the same amount. So one perspective is that maybe because right now in China, people already, they've been to work, so they don't spend that much of time playing games at home. That's one perspective. And the other perspective is that because the game designer, they're trying to give a lot of gift package on weekends. So actually can buy more stuffs with some discount. So one assumption is that we think players, they still have a huge demand to play game and purchase stuff, but they're trying to, look at something with better ROI. You don't need to spend that much of money, but you can still gain a lot of good stuff. So that explains why on weekends, users, they're still having a lot of in-app purchase. On advertisement side, actually, it has been a little bit difficult because for our understanding, the advertisers, they're not having more budget. The budget is actually shrinking down because of the situation. And actually, usually we spend more time to play games, to watch ads. That means we don't have enough view rate. We don't have enough view rate. Actually, the view rate all dropped a lot after the pandemic. So this together, actually, it becomes a little bit difficult situation. And back to your previous question, you were talking about live streaming, because we do cooperate with some of the big platform in China. As Bill said, actually, the platform in China, they become really popular because of the host. So the platform, they're actually trying to pay millions of dollars for the host to play the games. Whoever got the host, whoever got more audience. So actually, there are some new ways of doing this. We're actually trying to cooperate with some of the live streaming platform to combine with cloud gaming solution together. So you can actually, play the games and you can handle the control to some of the audience or compete with someone together on live stream. So actually in this way, you won't highly depend on the host, but you can depend on the format, the operation to get more audience, to make them more engaged. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of innovation and some necessary changes to make the best out of the new reality.
Hi,
Jeff,
Lisa.
Yeah, are you seeing
do you
anything
mind yes, do you mind? So I run the publishing business. So I have a few things to share about how things have been changing in the past 2-3 months. So what we see is in terms of advertising, we're hitting a new high because players have definitely more time. So first is we see a spike in our DAU, our CCU over time. And it have continued to spike. Even some of our more casual side of the game, like Subway Surfer, Temple Run, that we normally see player coming back 5 times a month, is coming back in 15 times a month to 20 times a month. So that's 4 times the coming back. So definitely when you have more view, if we look, now we're just talking about ad. So when you have more player coming back and you have more player, definitely that means you have more ad slots. Then the second problem is the fill rate. Do you have the capacity? Do you have enough orders that you're working with to fill up the ads? Now, I think in terms of what is happening to China right now, which is another thing that we're seeing, and I think this is going to be the same all over the world, is because of COVID-19, a lot of business is getting hit, especially the offline business. And if your game is relying on more online business advertising, you will have less hit. You are just working on the fill rate problem. But I think the overall ad industry, there's a big portion of it is from the offline industry or more traditional industry. And these industries are definitely struggling. This is not about do they have the budget, or it's more about do they still exist? Are they surviving? Right? There's a lot of bailout across the globe on traditional industry. So with these advertisers going away, obviously the online market is not capable of coming in to fill up all of them in one vacuum. So ultimately, what happens is because advertisers see that the view rate is not getting hit, then what us as the vendor, we will start lowering our price to increase the bill rate. And with that in place, then you have more people playing the game, but your ad revenue in terms of per CPA or per CPM is lowering, right? So I think this is going to have more of an effect as time goes by, because most companies just starting to realize how much of a hit they get and reorganizing themselves. So that's one. That's on the advertising side. Now, in terms of the in-app purchase side, I totally agree with one of the panelists. Where even pre-COVID-19, since 2018, in iDream Sky, we've been starting to see that Chinese gamers are getting more and more mature, where they are more reasonable and they are more skeptical about how they spend, what is the spending pattern in the game. Unlike what I have seen in the past 10 years, when Chinese gamers are kind of known to be like, they spend mindlessly. They will just go in and start consuming every single thing that there is in the game and try to spend all the money in the world in the game. Chinese gamers are now getting more and more mature. They start to look at the ROI. They start to look at like, who make the game? Is this a game I want to invest my time in? Is this a game I want to invest my hard-earned money in? Why not I pay another game which may be $49.99, or $69.99, and I can have equally 2 months of joy, rather than going into a game that is going to spend $2,000 or $3,000 just to be okay, right? So pre-COVID-19, this has already been a trend, and now in COVID-19, and I would say China is kind of in a semi-post-COVID-19 already. What we're seeing is the bigger guys get bigger. The quality, either the guys that is big is getting bigger, or the games that have shined through this period is getting a lot more traction because of the scale and word of mouth. Everyone is asking everyone's like, what game are you playing during COVID-19? Right, and people's like, I'm playing this game. So I think that is going to speed up the rate of maturity in the Chinese gamers' behavior. So like Bill said, content is king, and I think it is going to be even more predominant because of COVID-19. The consumer are definitely going to look for higher quality content.
All right, good. Well, that can only be positive for the industry, I think. I've got one more question to ask, and why don't I start with Amy? Do you think that gamers have taken this opportunity while sitting at home to shift from mobile gaming to PC gaming, or from PC gaming to mobile gaming? Do you think they're exploring other ways of gaming that they hadn't really taken the time to explore in the past, especially in light of the fact that some PC gamers still enjoy internet cafes, which are now closed or open and then closed and so forth? What are you seeing with your games and just the word on the street through you?
I think during this period, we're seeing a shift, a demand rise across all channels, so mobile and PC. It's still a function of your habits, and we've seen new titles come out on PC and console that's done really well in the last few months. But overall, I still think that mobile is going to be where the demand is and the growth is post this period for gaming.
Okay. And Bill, do you have any last words on that? Because I think we're just about out of time.
Sure. Well, I agree with Amy. Mobile is still dominant, while PC is still big market. Now over 40 million Chinese players on Steam these days. As for the internet cafes, I think that's a disaster for them. Well, when the coronavirus is over, will people go back to internet cafes? Yes. How many people will go back? That's a big question mark.
Yeah.
I have the answers.
Oh, you had the answers. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I have over 20 internet cafes in China in collaboration with Tencent. So we're operating official Tencent internet cafes in China. Obviously, during coronavirus, we shut everything down. However, we actually keep it operational online. So we're creating a virtual online internet cafe, which is kind of weird.
Wow, fascinating.
But actually, yes, I can share that sometimes later. But what we actually find out is after coronavirus, when the ban is lifted, people is just eager, dying to meet with real person, right? So they were flocking into the internet cafe, and we actually need to put in a measure to stop them and say like, all right, yes, it's over, but keep distance, please. Yes,
okay.
But definitely, I think it's still here.
All right. Well, that's great to know. I mean, I know it's such a part of the culture. So I could talk to you all for the next 3 hours, but I think we're being cut off. So thank you so much for sharing all of your views and your insight. It's been amazing. And for the people who are watching this live, then we can answer your questions in a room after, or you can also contact us directly via email and whatnot. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you to everybody on that panel. And we do have a few of the panelists in the Hero Stage Q&A breakout room. Bill Wang is there now and is being joined by Luke Stabley of Cocos, filling in for Cynthia there. So you can go ahead and head on over to the breakout Zoom room if you would like to discuss any of those topics or about bringing your game to China with them. And now I am pleased to announce our final panelist of the day. And this is one that I've been looking forward to. It's all about player behavior, your secret growth tool. Moderated by Kate Edwards of Geography. Please welcome her and panelists Clara Siegel of Facebook, Kim Vol of Stray Bombay, and Carlos Figueiredo, the Director of Trust and Safety at Two Hat Security. Enjoy.
Hi, my name is Kate Edwards, and I'm the Executive Director of the Global Game Jam and also a consultant at Geography that does game culturalization. And I'm really proud to be here to introduce the panel called Player Behavior, Your Secret Growth Tool for the GamesBeat Summit 2020, taking place online. And I would love to introduce our panelists. We have a great group of people who are here to discuss this topic, and we're going to focus on player behavior in the positive light, and essentially how can player behavior that we monitor, influence, and interact with in our game communities and in our services, how does that actually lead to potential growth for companies? And so to help us with that topic today, I'd like to introduce the panelists, or rather have the panelists introduce themselves, starting out with Kim.
Hello, I'm Dr. Kimberly Vol. I'm a designer and developer specializing in player behavior and artificial intelligence. Today, I currently run a small studio in Seattle, Washington, working on a cooperative shooter. And I'm also the co-founder as well as executive director of the Fair Play Alliance, which is an organization that supports gaming companies around the world in fostering healthy player interactions. I think part of the reason I got into this space initially is that I've really spent my life at the intersection of tech and behavior, specifically in games. So I've always been really fascinated by the role that the brain plays in our interactions in digital spaces. And personally, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I watched the tech world come online as a gamer, and as a female in that space, that came with its own challenges and revelations about ways in which we as a society needed to mature. And I think believing in games and the amazing folks that gamers are, I've just always felt a deep and personal passion about helping make gaming a better place.
Fantastic. How about you, Clara?
Hi, it's Clara. Hi, I'm Clara Siegel. I'm a product manager with Facebook Gaming, and I work on gaming video and community products. Just for folks to be aware, our gaming video creator program started in 2018. It's now the number 3 most watched live game streaming service. And we really try to, focus on helping communities engage around streamers and games that they love. So very, very aligned with this topic. I just wanted to share kind of a personal story in why I care about this topic. As I was growing up, there were definitely some times where I felt like it didn't fit in. And as during those times, there were always groups of people who loved to play video games, who I felt like I could be friends with. They were, very much, it was very much a culture of people celebrating each other for their idiosyncrasies and differences. And I found that not only to be just really joyous in terms of diversity, as well as creativity, but also just an area and space where I could be myself. So when I think about games, not only do I think about the game itself and what's fun about that, but also this sort of deep connection to a culture and a community of people who, can be different and different from each other. And that's a great thing. So just thrilled to be on this panel. Kate, you've done a ton of work in the space, Kim and Carlos as well, through the Fair Play Alliance. So looking forward to a good discussion.
Great, thank you. And how about you, Carlos?
Thank you. My name is Carlos Figueiredo. I'm Director of Community Trust and Safety for Two Hat. I'm also a co-founder and vice chair of the Fair Play Alliance. And really what got me working in this area and interested in this was working for Club Penguin for 6 years, many years ago, when I started my journey in 2008. And being a moderator there, also doing chat filtering and generally understanding the community and being there with the kids, I really saw how a game can grow around a very strong community and how those things go really well together. It's a strong community that's safeguarded, that's productive, that's healthy, and that generally, in my experience, means a brand that's global, it's reaching everywhere. And I think that makes a lot of sense to have those two things together. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you all. So let's first talk and focus on the player behavior component. I mean, again, we don't really need to dwell too much on the negative side of player behavior. We have seen that discussed ad infinitum in all kinds of other articles and sources and panels and everything else. I don't think we really need to retread that topic because a lot of people are very much aware of the fact that there is toxic behavior in communities out there and amongst player behavior. And at the same time, we know in general that the great majority of people who are involved in our communities are on the positive side, and they are there to have a great experience and enjoy themselves. So when it comes to thinking about how we minimize the negative player behavior that might show up in our communities and maximize the positive interactions, what kind of fundamental choices do you think need to be made from a design perspective in the games themselves, as well as the gaming services or the products that we employ with the consumers? What kind of choices do you think are fundamental to be made in the design aspect?
I'm happy to take a first stab at this one. I think the biggest thing is to step back and really look critically at what the root causes of the behavior that you're seeing in the game are in the first place. I think there's a lot of tendency to kind of take behavior that we see in games as a given, rather than stepping back and looking at it from a design perspective of what are the choices that we're making as designers or developers that lead to certain behavior patterns. And I'll just give you 3 really quick examples. I think one is friction can come from a lot of places, which sets games off on the wrong foot when players are frustrated and they might take it out on each other. So this could include design choices or misaligned expectations about the kind of experience that players are anticipating. A second is the values that you want to see in the game through the design choices that you're making. Are you reinforcing those values? Are you potentially creating confusion in that how your characters behave within their fiction is contradicting the sorts of habits and behaviors you want to see within the game? Are you fostering trust between players, or are you prematurely asking players to have connections that, as normal humans we wouldn't have with strangers? And then I think the third bucket is, it bears mentioning that intentional disruptive behavior is pretty rare, but nonetheless, we need to be able to handle those as effectively as possible, and we need to treat that with the same degree of rigor in the approach that we would with any design aspect of our product, so that we're really thinking about an end-to-end experience.
Anybody else?
I can share a bit about what we've done on Facebook Gaming. So we talked with a whole bunch of customers, and one of the biggest insights that we got is a lot of people are coming to the platform because they want really positive, kind of positive conversations and welcoming and engaging communities. And when we looked into what could we do to help promote that, people wanted less of Facebook Gaming kind of popping up and saying, hey, you should be more positive. And really what they wanted was to just feel comfortable that it was a kind of safe and welcoming environment. So the key elements of that we found just through these conversations was, 1, people want to know what are the rules and norms of the community, and 2, are they being enforced? And it turned out that sort of with those 2 in mind, not only were people able to have better expectations set for what kind of content is and is not allowed in those communities, which is going to be good for people that might break the norms, as well as for people wanting to know if they're going to feel safe there. But 2, it kind of set expectations for, hey, is this the right community for me? And I think that's going to be true at a platform level. So any gaming company or gaming product company is going to want to have a set of standards that are enforced sort of centrally, dealing with some of the sort of most toxic types of behavior. And then for any communities within the platform, they should have an opportunity also to say hey, this is what this community is all about. So what the company can really do there is offer tools to help those communities be able to kind of set and enforce and communicate their norms.
How about you, Carlos? Any thoughts on this? I know that you've had in your work things like auto monitoring of chat rooms and things like that to basically employ methods that can kind of walk alongside what exists in the community and help moderators and help the companies also check the behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really starts with what Clara was saying there, like a really good definition of what are the types of behaviors that are really well aligned with the platform or the very purpose of the game that you want to see players doing and engaging, right? And then what are the types of behavior that are pretty much orthogonal to that experience, right? That are going to take away from that intended experience in the game or in the platform. I talk to a lot of gaming companies consulting, and I'm surprised a lot of times when folks haven't yet put the thought into that. you know, and surprised, but also understand that it's difficult. It's really difficult to have that solid, that shared terminology and understanding. Once you have that, then you have definitions of that type of behavior. You're able to identify it, right, and to action on it. And one thing that we have been seeing, like as a big change in the games industry in the last few years, is moving away from just punishment. And I think this is a really important part because, you know, before we were just thinking, oh, bad people are behaving badly, and we forget that we have bad days, you know, especially right now in the climate that we have bad days, right? And we might behave not in the best possible way, you know, in a game session. That doesn't mean that we always behave like that, right? And so I really think about a couple of things. One is nudging technique. You know, related to what Kim and Clara said, you know, like you have those expectations, you have the environment of the game. If somebody happens to behave in a way that contradicts that, you know, give them a warning message instead of suspending them, right? Nudge them in the right direction and see what that does. But then for sure, I find it really table stakes to have a strong contextual filter that's able to prevent the worst. Very much in a proactive way, right? If somebody is really using dangerous speech, hateful speech, why expose players to that if you're able to identify that and block it?
Well, that actually segues really well into the other thing I'm curious about on this topic, and especially how we influence player behavior, because obviously, you know, any gaming community is not just about the game. I mean, that might be the thing that draws people in, but then the community itself, for a lot of people, becomes the reason they come back because they want to be a part of that community, and you know, for all kinds of reasons. So kind of following on your point, Carlos, how do we actually model positive behavior and positive interactions within a community? I mean, are there tools that we can use or some kind of other method that's out there that will help us do that kind of thing?
For sure, you know, having flexible settings, I think that's really important, right? In the past, there was a very heavy-handed approach of allow and disallow lists and just blocking words and then, you know, preventing people from saying all sorts of things. And when we know things are very contextual, it depends on how it's being said, who is saying it. So when I talk about flexible settings is we know that a lot of games have a lobby or a public area, right? And that is largely like a public square. So you have all sorts of folks interacting there for the first time. I really see that as a little bit as an invitation card. You know, if you just join a game and the first thing you experience is somebody using dangerous speech and, you know, being racist, like, wow, right? Like, do you want to be in this area here? So you can have settings a bit more strict there, right? In terms of what's allowed. If you have private chat or clan chat and group chat, you can be a bit more lax as a platform because there's a bit more of knowledge there of who's part of that team, who is chatting there. So you can open it up a little bit. There are great examples of that flexibility right now, right? Like we can look at companies like Twitch, for example, with the way that they develop auto mod and people are able to set the standards and the norms of their community. That's an example, but there are many other platforms. And what Facebook Gaming did in the project that Clara shared, you know, streamers having that opportunity to set what is the intended experience of their channel. I think we need to look at giving people the agency and flexibility.
Yeah, I would just add that I think one of the most important things in addition to that is clarity and consistency, both for players as well as for your studio and extended support team. You really want to think about modeling the types of behaviors that you want to see in game as well. And I think all too often I've encountered inconsistent examples where there's just not really a clear understanding of what good looks like or what those expectations are even within the studio. I think extending out of that as well, equipping or empowering ambassadors to also help set that example, you know, make those folks or help those folks become, you know, public figures and raise the visibility of folks that are really showcasing the kind of values and the way that you hope to see your game, you know, your game played in the first place.
First of all, I want to echo a couple of the things that have been said already. I think that player behavior is such an important part of people's experience when interacting with any product or game. And we, as the people who are building these, should think about it as just as important as the other elements of what we're building into the game or the gaming platform. Also, Carlos, you mentioned something about customizability, and I just wanted to share what we're doing on our end. And thank you also for mentioning it. So what we have is at a central level, Facebook offers centralized community standards, which Facebook also enforces. And then in terms of customizability, what we've decided to do, and sort of amazingly, I want to say thank you so much for your help on this. We partnered with you and Kim as part of the Fair Play Alliance on this as well, was to basically identify what are the most common types of disruptive behaviors that people sometimes experience in gaming communities online, and to try to offer a toolkit around those. And the way we did that is we came up with an optional set of rules. So these are things like don't criticize, which would address a common issue where people who are newer players sometimes, get made fun of and feel excluded in communities, as well as be accepting, which, is intended to help people of all backgrounds and maybe game choices feel welcome in a community. And we offered those as optional to our streamers who are really community leaders on the platform, to be able to pick and choose and to be able to communicate, hey, this is what this community is all about. And then back to what you were saying, Carlos, around education, this toolkit allows the moderator, when they remove a comment, to indicate which rule was broken. And that's back to what you were saying around, hey, maybe you're just having a bad day, or maybe you forgot kind of what this rule meant. So, we'll offer you this reminder, and hopefully it can help. This is really about communities being able to craft the kinds of spaces they want and just be really clear on what those norms are so that people can feel authentic being themselves.
That's fantastic. So have you seen, has the toolkit been implemented for a while now, or I'm just curious, have you seen results from it at this point?
So we're rolling it out now. And so we don't have the volume yet to see the results. But the initial feedback was really positive. So we saw a very large amount of adoption in the initial group of streamers that we released this to. And there's a great interview with Melanie Mack in VentureBeat where she talks about kind of being able to tell people, hey, this is what this community is all about, and kind of avoid some of the more common issues that people might have.
Excellent. So let's assume that companies, that you've all mentioned several tools and approaches at this point that they can employ, basically, a wide range of things, from the toolkit that was just mentioned to kind of sort of the light touch, having rules and having policies in place, but not being too heavy-handed about it, things of that nature. So let's say a company implements these strategies in their community and in their game design. How do you see these actually leading to growth? Are there any examples you have of how implementation leads to more player engagement or retention or revenue? Basically, how do we make that connection?
Yeah, I can share an example. I've been thinking about this for a while now, having worked for Two Hat for now over 5 years. We experienced in the past a lot of resistance from a lot of companies where didn't really see the point of doing those things. They saw that as censorship or really taking away from the experience. And we saw this shift of folks really understanding that a disruptive behavior actually was leading to people leaving, quitting the game, and really players do care about a healthy community, right? So we did a white paper study with one of our clients. It's an anonymous white paper, but it's a major mobile game. And what we noticed there is that for everybody who engages in chat, especially in group chat, the lifetime value and the engagement overall, the session lengths are way bigger than those who don't chat. So, and I'm gonna share the specific metrics with you, but it's important to notice that it's the chat. It's very central to that game, as it is in a lot of online platforms, right? And the difference is, we know that the stickiness of social in games, right? In my intro there, I was talking about Club Penguin. That game was all about social, right? I can talk about a game like Sky, Children of the Light, where there are specific areas of the game where people gather and talk, and it's very much about the community and that social stickiness, right? So that said, in the white paper, we noticed that for those who chat in the group chat, so not even in the public areas, actually, like in the group chat, you have your own group, the lifetime value of those players, it's actually 20 times of those who don't chat. That was the result of that study. And also in terms of engagement of session length, it's also 4 times bigger. So you see the engagement there, and of course, lifetime value and all that. But it's important to notice it's a particular community that has those flexible settings that I was talking about, right? The group chat has different filter settings than the public chat. And that flexibility allows for safeguarding the players and allows really the positive to flourish. Like you said, Kate, the majority of the behavior is positive. So it's not allowing the disruption to get in the way of that.
Yeah, I would add that players should expect and deserve to have a safe and inclusive place to play. I think as developers, we're kind of used to thinking about games as single player, and I think we bring a lot of that old school mentality into designing and developing games for multiple players. But at the end of the day, human brains are just better than most experiences with AI, or AI can augment that. But we like playing with people because of the richness of the experience that affords. But that comes with the cost of the interplay between these players. So there's this whole other layer of things we have to think about in terms of how people will relate to each other in the context of games and what that means when compared against our mechanics and the type of experience we're trying to create. So a lot of what we're talking about is table stakes from the perspective of this is how our games reach their full potential. You can't ignore the fact that you might create this cool little sandbox, but you're going to put a bunch of humans in it and they're going to interact in different ways and things are going to different things are going to happen. And I think overall that we know just from being humans ourselves, and the psychology research bears this as well, is that feeling included means you want to stay. You want to stick around at a place where you feel welcome. So there's this sort of base level, this is a smart thing to do and it will pay a lot of dividends. And even though we're still kind of figuring out a lot of best practices in this space, and that's why we started the Fair Play Alliance, to be able to support companies around the world in doing this. Ultimately we're getting better at this. We're going to keep seeing those dividends, and early results are already showing that it's quite positive, as Carlos says.
I'll share a bit of thinking here too. So when we talk about kind of expanding the player base as a result of these, if you think of the total player base as everyone in the world who plays games, we're talking about, in the ballpark of 2.5 billion people. So I really think it's up to each game developer and each company to decide, how welcoming they want to be towards those people. And I think one factor of that is going to be, hey, if I'm making a specific game, what element of the 2.5 billion is going to be interested in this specific type of game? But then in addition to that, you have kind of this conversion factor. So I'm getting a little nerdy here, but a conversion factor of people who are coming in and might feel like, oh, like the conversations here are just kind of rubbing me the wrong way. So they might bounce out. So I think just from a purely kind of numbers and theoretical perspective, it definitely makes sense for folks to realize the sort of growth potential that comes from this. Certainly Facebook, for better or for worse, is known as like a very, very inclusive platform, like your grandparents are on it, probably. And, we have 700 million people who play games or engage in gaming groups each month, and 40% of them are women. So the market is definitely there. And I think it's just really up to each company to decide how to welcome them.
Well, that's a great point, Clara. And I mean, that actually leads to one of the other things I'm curious about in terms of growing the player base and growing interest in the game platform. How does that actually intersect with the desire for a lot of companies to increase their player base beyond the typical demographics who are playing games and to expand into more underrepresented groups? I mean, obviously a lot of companies today are focused on, diversity and inclusion in their communities and trying to see, not just from the game design perspective, how can they attract more people who may not be typical players of their particular game, but also attract more people into the community who may not feel that they are, necessarily part of that particular group. And especially when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, not just from a strict gender or ethnicity standpoint, but also just culturally as well and geographically. I mean, I know for myself, having traveled to a lot of emerging markets where oftentimes I hear people reflect that they'll go into a lot of gaming platforms or systems that are coming out of the West primarily, and they feel that it is somewhat exclusionary just because they're not necessarily built completely for their experience as well. And so I'm wondering, do you all see that how implementing these tools and approaches, it's not just going to increase the essentially the baseline positivity within the community, but also potentially attract people who are underrepresented as well? How do you see that working as well?
I think that one of the things we really need to do is take a greater critical eye to the ways in which our games and gaming environments might be antithetical to that to begin with. What are the ways in which we have behaviors or the designs themselves that are actually not upholding that value, that actually might be exclusive in some capacity, and honing those skills to better detect that. It's really hard at the end of the day when we're talking about global products with people from a diverse background, all over the world. It's difficult for people to get along in the best of circumstances because, we're all complex, interesting individuals. And when you add layers of culture and other differences and combine that with an impoverished communication space that you see in games typically, you sort of get this recipe for a lot of friction. And that is often what we see breaking down. So we're looking for those kinds of things and trying to be proactive and foster spaces and build tools that really grow with players, grow with trust, I think is one of the best places that we can really focus our efforts. Because at the end of the day, acceptance builds trust. Trust leads to more charitable and effective interactions. And in general, just behavior and interpretations of people's behavior improves with trust.
I want to add as well to that, if that's okay, Kate.
Yeah.
Just like this angle of, when we're talking about safeguarding players, right, from abusive behavior, from dangerous speech, it's also important to do that in all the languages that you're supporting, right? And do it properly with automated tools and also staff who understands that culture. I know your work, Kate, is very much culturally aware and understanding all those aspects. Sometimes the systems we put in games for content moderation, they are not super culturally aware. So it's important to have that, that nuance as well. And if when we think about, in terms of the moral obligation, the right thing to do, safeguarding players, I think we all here don't need to convince ourselves, right? We know it's the right thing to do. From the point of view of growth, we discussed that, but also we can't deny the landscape of upcoming legislation, for example, that's coming in the UK with online harms, in Australia, some new legislation being discussed in the US and Canada. So if we are not safeguarding users in all their respective languages, we're also going to find some friction with governments, right? So better that we are also proactive as an industry and getting ahead of that curve.
Absolutely. So essentially what I'm hearing then is that, honestly, given all the examples you've provided about the different tools and approaches, which seem to be more widespread than I think a lot of people would imagine in terms of their implementation, it sounds to me like there's a lot of companies that are taking these approaches because they already realize that, effectively adapting their products and adapting their games to reinforce a more positive community and to reinforce positive player behavior really is a growth mechanism. And so even though this panel has been titled Your Secret Growth Tool, I think it's not so secret, to be honest. And so it sounds to me like this is an area of best practices that a lot of companies are starting to consider, or they're already well into implementation, but obviously it would be a great area for a lot of other companies to also consider. And with that, I think we're just about done with our time. So I would like to thank our panelists for their time and for their expertise. And if they have any parting quick thoughts, please do.
I think just keep in mind there's no solution. The aim is to reduce the overall number of poor interactions and increase the number of positive interactions that you're seeing in a space. But at the end of the day, these are spaces packed full of humans that come with all of the rich and interesting complexities that we see in non-digital spaces. So we need to bring that mindset and try to enrich these spaces as they're intended, which is for humans.
Just a quick parting thought is that, like we discussed before, normative behavior in games is really positive behavior. A lot of times we lose track of that in games and gaming platforms. So it's important for us to remember that the disruption is very small part. Usually you have positive interactions in games. So the idea is to design to maximize those positive interactions and also to deal with the disruption when it happens, because it gets in the way of the purpose of the platform and not because we just want to go out there and punish people and that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think it's so exciting to see so many companies in the space realizing that this is really important and really what a lot of people want. And I would just encourage that for companies who are just starting out, there's probably, as you start unturning stones, there's going to be some really easy wins and ways that you'll realize you can kind of improve the community for everybody.
Great. Well, thank you so much all once again, and thank you all for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to Kate and her entire panel. As I mentioned in the Hero Stage Slack channel, they will be joining the Hero Stage Q&A breakout room to continue the conversation if you would like to talk to them about player behavior. Certainly some really interesting stats in that panel. Lots of stuff to dive into there. But we're at the end of our day. Can you believe it? A full 2 days of GamesBeat Summit 2020. I want to give a big thank you to all of the panelists and speakers who have made their way across the Hero Stage today and the Boss Stage as well. Whether you joined the breakout rooms or lurked in the chat, we're glad that you joined us for our virtual event this year. I want to give a big thank you to all of our sponsors who helped make this possible. And of course, to the GamesBeat, VentureBeat, and production teams who worked tirelessly to organize this virtual event. I think it means a lot to all of us in the games industry who put so much emphasis on networking and those face-to-face connections. I think we all really grew accustomed to just seeing each other every couple of months at these events that happen so often in video games, and knowing that we're not going to get those contact moments for the foreseeable future, it really was a special couple of days. So thank you for participating, whether you were a speaker or attendee. I'm not going to say any more because Dean Takahashi, our fearless leader, has some closing remarks. And so I'm going to go ahead and send you guys to the Boss Stage. But I do want to remind you that we are doing a reception after Dean's remarks. You can find the links to get to the reception room in the GamesBeat Slack, which again will be open for a few weeks beyond the conference if you want to continue conversations with other attendees. So thank you, everybody. And I'll go ahead and toss it to Dean. Thank you. Goodbye.